Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching second and final part of What If Naruto Was Executed and Returned as a Vampire God. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Even though the moon was shining brightly on this lovely night in the hidden village of the Leaf, people were still up. Unexpectedly, there were two Naras among them. Shikaku Nara, the Leaf's most skilled strategist, and his son Shikamaru Nara. At the moment, the two were enjoying a leisurely game of shogi. 2. How was your trip towards water country? Troublesome, I presume. Shikamaru shuddered when he considered all the unpleasant things her mother forced him to do if he had accompanied his father. It was troublesome indeed. You're lucky that your mother didn't drag you with us. Shikaku quickly recognized the person to whom his son was alluding. Yes, I had the best week of my life, so what did you think what happened with him? He asked. With a sigh, he said. He tried to invade a certain person's mind but failed. With an inquisitive tone, the younger of the two said, You're surprisingly calm about it, 2. Shikamaru was taken aback by the icy tone in his father's voice as he said, Being angry about it is too troublesome. He knew that getting upset about it wouldn't make it go away, but still. Even if he was your best friend, Shikaku knew he was stepping on thin ice, and he couldn't tell him that Inoichi didn't trust him enough to share his newfound ability to read minds, and that he even used it on his best friend Nara. Shikamaru could see that it wasn't the true reason he was so estranged from Ino's father, but he would wait until his father was prepared to explain the truth. It was his own fault for trying to invade that person's mind. Whose mind did he actually try to invade? Alucard Shitsuki. When the Nara patriarch mentioned Alucard, he could plainly see his son's fists. It seems that you still haven't managed to process it? Shikamaru's nails became so tight that they nearly drew blood. How can I not? He killed all of my men and I couldn't do anything about it. I will get him back. Shikaku interpreted this as an indication to soothe his offspring. Shikamaru saw the wisdom in his words and calmed down, saying, But your anger will not make it come any sooner. You're right, so did you find anything about him? Yes, he can walk on water. Shikamaru scowled upon hearing this, as shinobi frequently walked on water. After that, he recalled some details. His thoughts were racing with ideas like manipulating water, manipulating forces, etc. Without chakra. How does he do it? When his father spoke again, he was startled out of his thoughts. The options are far too many, no need to ponder about it. The second thing he can do is manipulating blood. The Chunin said, It does direct towards a control of water. Shikaku nodded in agreement. I still have one piece of the puzzle. Shikamaru knew his father well enough to know that this was the most crucial piece of all. While it does point in that way, there's no need to make assumptions so soon. There are a lot of things we don't know about him. With all the zeal a Nara could muster, he inquired, What's the last piece of the puzzle? He looked at his son and noticed that he was in his favorite contemplative pose. He fancies Hinata Hyuga. So what do you think about it? He asked. Shikamaru's eyes opened abruptly, and he uttered. We have to see the Hokage. The eldest of the two said, So you came towards the same conclusion as me. Yes, I should have seen it sooner, but why didn't you tell Hokage Sama that Naruto is still alive, if you already knew this? Shikaku was simply staring at his child. Shikaku then got up with the intention of approaching the Hokage and sharing the information, saying, I don't know much about him. You on the other hand are more familiar with him. When Shikaku heard his son ask, Why are we in such a hurry? It's not that a few minutes would make such a difference. He gave it some thought and realized that his son was correct in this case. He then took a seat and resumed playing shogi. That's my son, Shikaku thought proudly as a parent. They had no idea how much of a difference those few minutes would actually make. After working all day, Tsunade felt she deserved some sake as she sipped it at her desk. Normally, Shizune, her chatty assistant, would remind her of all the work she still needed to do, but she was on a mission and could unwind without any worries. She felt something, but it wasn't malevolent as she gradually drunk herself. She said irritably, Jiraiya, I know you're here. It was her good night. Then Jiraiya showed himself. Tsunade simply sighed and said, Good night, Haim. So what brings you here? I thought that you were going to gone for 2 months. Tsunade instantly straightened up when the Toad Sage said, I found some disturbing information. He reserved that tone for serious situations. Then she inquired. Jiraiya began his report with the question, What did you find? I was visiting my informants, when I heard a rumor about Orochimaru. He then directed me towards the marshlands. I followed the trail and came across a battlefield. I noticed some signs of a fire jutsu, so I guess that most evidence was destroyed through it. I still found some interesting things though. He retrieved a small bag from his vest and asked, "What are those things?" When the bag was extricated from his vest, it clacked. Then he threw the bag's contents onto the desk. Tsunade thought they were the human hand's distal phalanges. When she first saw it, she has seen them before, but they are not like the hand of a typical human. Where had she seen them, she wondered. In an attempt to assist Tsunade, Jiraiya commented, "The first are these bones embedded in a tree a bit away from the battle zone." Then Tsunade recalled the location of the bones she had seen. "Those are the bones of a Kagaya. They are similar to the ones we found of that Kagaya boy that interfered during the retrieval mission." The Kagaya clan was a major clan, so it could be that they were already there. "What else did you find?" Jiraiya reached for a small scroll and opened it. It was a standard body containment scroll, as Tsunade could see. This. Jiraiya exposed the corpse by pushing some chakra. When Tsunade saw the body, she gasped. That was Orochimaru's. Apparently, it was sliced in two. In an odd moment of hesitation, Tsunade asked. Jiraiya shook his head, asking, "That's Orochimaru's body?" At first I thought it as well, but I then found some other clues that indicated that this wasn't his real body. Jiraiya simply grabbed another bag and threw it at Tsunade in response to the question, "What are those clues?" When she caught sight of it, she was shocked. Bullets and casings from a well-known brand of firearms filled the bag. Tsunade then removed a scroll and sealed all the evidence inside for additional analysis, saying, "These are the same as the Object S that Shikamaru returned by Chunin Shikamaru Nara." Tsunade looked at Jiraiya incredulously and said, "It means that Alucard fought Orochimaru and survived. I even think that he killed him. The Sannin was very difficult to kill because of his body shedding techniques and immortality, which made Orochimaru nearly impossible to kill." Jiraiya was about to elaborate on his statement when he heard two knocks on the door. "Now, you're just exaggerating. Come in." To the surprise of Jiraiya and Tsunade, the door opened and the two Naras emerged. They both assumed they would be playing shogi or taking a nap. "Tsunade, we have urgent news." The older Nara's slack tone overshadowed the gravity of the situation. Tsunade asked, "And what is that urgent news?" "We have information about the identity of Alucard Shitsuki." "Who is it?" Tsunade hurried out of her chair and slammed Shikaku against the wall by his throat as soon as she said, "Naruto Uzumaki." Shikaku has maintained his bored expression because he expected his cage to react this way. Tsunade growled, "Don't fuck with me, he is dead," as she humbly squeezed his subordinate's throat. A hand on her shoulder, courtesy of Jiraiya, stopped her. After giving it some thought, she said, Wait a second, it does make sense. Now, everything does make sense. Sasuke Uchiha's friendship with Gaara and the animosity towards Konoha in particular. How he responded to the Kabikari Bacha. His bond with Wave. The private details surrounding his execution. The Hokage said to Shikaku, "I guess you're right, but how did he come back? We killed him, even destroyed his body to make sure he didn't come back." However, Shikaku's son responded, "We don't know, but we need to prepare ourselves for whatever he has planned for us. We need to gather more information about him. There's several things that doesn't make sense," said Shikaku. The others gave him a perplexed look. "Like what?" Jiraiya inquired. "Why didn't he reveal himself?" "What do you mean?" The three were considering it, but Shikaku just kept thinking, he had the chance to reveal his existence towards the world. It would make us look pathetic and it would gain him new allies. So why didn't he do it? Someone who is hostile to Naruto Uzumaki has something that he wants. There are only 3 groups who are hostile to Naruto Uzumaki. The first one are ourselves. The second is Akatsuki and the last one is Orochimaru. The latter of the two don't have anything that could interest him, so it means that we possess something that he wants. But the question is what? The 4 of them discussed it. Tsunade remembered the necklace she wore around her at the moment. As the son of Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze, Jiraiya considered his inheritance. On the other hand, Shikamaru considered a number of ideas. After dismissing them all, they discovered the true prize. Shikamaru said, "Hinata Hyuga." His dad gave him a nod of approval. Indeed, she's probably his target. With a shunsen, the Anbu vanished. So we now know his weakness. "Anbu, get me Hinata Hyuga." It came back rather quickly, but Hinata Hyuga wasn't there. He bowed and said, "Sorry, sir, we didn't found her in her room, but we found an unusual amount of blood there." Hinata was thinking a lot. In fact, her thoughts were so intense that they were giving her headaches. A backpack stuffed full of mostly clothing and some photos of her mother was visible behind her. The Hyuga forbade excessive personal property because they believed it to be a sign of weakness, and Konoha's most powerful clan did not tolerate weakness. Her shrine was the only item she had forgotten to pack, but it was located far from the village. She used a number of genjutsu to protect the shrine out of fear that it would be destroyed if anyone saw it. After that, Hinata walked to her room's window and gazed at the moon. She was wearing a purple and white sweater, a fishnet shirt, blue pants that fell halfway down to her shins, and a pair of black sandals. The necklace she wore to the party completed her ensemble. Consider Shippuden without the necklace and headband. Naruto.kun. What would you have me do? She considered fleeing in Wave's direction, but that might interfere with his plans. She had no idea that he might already be approaching her. She found herself thinking about Naruto, or rather, Alucard. She was still in shock that he would return so quickly. He always had a way of accomplishing the seemingly impossible, so she was confident he would return. She pondered how he managed to return. She gave it a lot of thought and developed the most bizarre theories. It is irrelevant because he returned. That's all that matters, now. Hinata was oblivious to the danger that was approaching her as she gazed at the moon. The Demon Quarter of Konoha is a lawless area on the outskirts of the city. Historically, this area was home to middle-class residents, but 10 years ago, Hiruzen Sarutobi gave a child named Naruto Uzumaki an apartment in this neighborhood. The impact was immediate. Hokage stopped the plans to force Naruto out of his apartment because no one wanted to do anything with the demon brat, but that was all he could do aside from paying him frequent visits. They made the decision to leave their neighborhood and live somewhere else since they were unable to drive the demon out. The police then concluded that since there was only one person residing in this area, they didn't need to patrol it. A new type of person who didn't hesitate to get their hands dirty was drawn in as a result of this neglect. The 6-year-old actually benefited from the population shift. The elderly residents showed him indifference rather than hostility. Although the Hokage didn't like that Naruto had to live in such conditions, he gave in because Naruto received better treatment. Additionally, it kept the majority of crimes within the quarter. A bat colony came together to form a black-haired, no-life king in this neighborhood. Even though his red coat contrasted with his surroundings, nobody in the area gave it much notice. Alucard simply made his way over to the Hyuga compound. Because of his ruthlessness and daimyo status, he was almost universally known. The count was addressed by one of the district's men. "Hey there, what are you doing so far away from Wave? Leave now, your kind draws too much attention to this place." Alucard glanced at the individual. Though not as tall as Alucard, he was still tall. His ponytail, which reached his back, held his brown hair in place. He was dressed in a standard black suit, black shoes, and a yellow tie. His right hand was covered in tattoos, the only other distinguishable features. Since no ordinary store would sell him anything, and if they did, they would sell junk at exorbitant prices, he recognized the man as Wiraj, his former weapon supplier. First, the two got off to a bad start. Naruto asked one of the Yakuza if he had any kunai or shuriken for sale because he needed them. Wiraj was the Yakuza. He kicked Naruto multiple times and pushed him to the ground after losing many friends in the Kyuubi attack. When the Oyabune finally learned, they were furious. Initially, he simply allowed his feelings to influence his decisions, potentially sabotaging a good deal. Second, he put his entire base of operations in danger because the Oyabun knew the boy's relationship to the Hokage. The Yakuza were able to establish their presence here because of that relationship. He would lose millions of ryo if the Hokage discovered that he was cleaning the ship in the quarter. In accordance with Yakuza custom, Wiraj was then compelled to cut his pinky or risk losing his honor. Wiraj was then instructed by the Oyabun to check if Naruto was still open to an offer. Since kunai and shuriken are inexpensive and simple to obtain, they could earn some quick cash because they were exempt from paying taxes and fees to obtain approval. Naruto became Wiraj's supplier of ninja gear after accepting the deal. Alucard then noticed the pinky, which was still missing, on Wiraj's left hand. The vampire remarked, "You should make a prosthesis for that missing pinky." The Yakuza replied, "It is a reminder of a mistake that could ruin our clan." Alucard then walked past the gaping man and headed for the Hyuga compound, saying, "Losing control over your emotions is normal, so stop being a whiny brat and get over it." The fact that the man knew what had happened surprised him. Only the Oyabun was aware of how he lost his pinky. How his leader found out was still a mystery to him. Wiraj was unaware that the Sandaime was using his crystal ball to observe Naruto. After that, The Sandaime went to see the clan chief and reminded him of the reasons they were permitted to open their business in this area of Konoha. Wiraj had only one conclusion after considering Alucard's behavior. At that point, Wiraj rushed to his Oyabun to tell him, Konoha is screwed. The root agent thought, a clear night is not good for this type of mission, but it doesn't matter, since I'm going to infiltrate the Hyuga's compound. Now he stood on the edge of the compound. His task? Take Hinata Hyuga prisoner. He didn't know why, but he followed Danzo Sama's instructions. Alucard had a bad feeling, which he only experienced occasionally. The first time it occurred was during the retrieval mission, just before he was scheduled to arrive in Konoha. The second occurred the night before Hellsing enslaved him, shortly before his final conflict as a human. The final one occurred just before he was going to take in London. Normally, he would have disregarded that feeling, but since it always led to catastrophe, he made the decision to take no chances. With the help of his sixth sense, he changed into Baskerville and flew in the direction of Hinata's room. He turned to face the Hyuga guards and said, I got inside the main branch building, now to take care of those guards. He would have been discovered sooner if they had activated their Byakugan. He removed 2 Senbon and hurled them in the direction of the guards, immobilizing them all with a pressure point hit. The sleeping agent that the Senbon were coated in caused them to fall asleep. Then he headed for the heiress's chamber. A stray dog pushed over several people who were cursing. The majority of them swore without considering the large dog. The dog was moving at a noticeable pace in the direction of the Hyuga compound. The majority of the men thought, lucky bastard, because they were aware that the Inuzuka clan would likely capture and use any dog that showed signs of being a nin. Dog as breeding stock. Those men were inebriated and failed at what he would succeed at, getting laid, which is what most people would consider a terrible fate. He and his target were on the same floor. All he had to do now was go into her room, knock the heiress unconscious, and leave the building immediately. Since any Hyuga could spot him and activate their Byakugan, he had no time to waste. The only thing that kept him from being nervous was his root training. He surveyed the area before making his way to the target's room. Alucard sensed that his vibe was growing stronger and that it was related to Hinata. Next he reached the wall separating the commoners from the Hyugas. Then, using his sixth sense, he jumped on the wall while still in his dog form, then phased through the wall and jumped toward the floor where Hinata was. He was at the door between himself and his prey. After weaving a few hand signals, the root agent melted into the ground. Alucard was running as quickly as he could without making any noise because he didn't want to attract undue attention that might lead to a fight that might injure Hinata. His vibe was growing so strong that it nearly freed his instincts, but his sixth sense was telling him that he was getting closer. He looked around the room from the floor, but no one was there, and his target was too preoccupied to notice. He then moved away from the floor and approached him slowly before pulling out a piece of cloth soaked in chloroform. He was going to cover her face with the piece of cloth, but he saw that his target was only just conscious of his presence. Too late, the man thought. Hinata sensed some movement in the air. Ordinarily, she could have responded quickly, but for a brief moment, her trauma made her freeze. To her astonishment, however, nothing occurred. Then the most bizarre scene ever greeted her. A black dog stood in front of a bloody puddle in her room. Then she saw that the dog's teeth were stained with blood. What took place? The girl was perplexed. Mini, flashback. Alucard phased through the wall after his sixth sense indicated that this was the final room. Then he noticed an Anbu behind Hinata wearing a blank mask. The cloth that the Anbu was holding was most likely soaked in a sedative. Then he threw himself at the Anbu and ripped his throat. Then the Anbu abruptly turned to blood. A blood clone, the Count thought. Mini, flashback at the end. Hinata gave the dog a perplexed look. However, when the dog turned into a pool of darkness, she let out a gasp. She thought of the man a moment ago, and the shadow reformed in him. With a sly smile, the man said. He was interrupted when Hinata jumped in his chest, put her arms around his waist, and began to cry. Hello Hinata. Chan, eh? Alucard's eyes grew wide because he had never seen this before. He hasn't received a hug in at least 100 years. But that didn't mean he didn't like the sensation. Hinata, still in tears, screamed out his thoughts. Alucard's eyes grew softer before he whispered, I'm so happy that you're back, I missed you so much. After she stopped crying, Hinata said, me too, but we have to go now, so prepare yourself for a little trip. Hinata then grabbed her backpack and they headed for the shrine, Alucard in his dog form, saying, I already have packed everything, but I still need to get something. It's several dozen kilometers away the village. Since Hinata was a shinobi and it was expected that they would occasionally have to complete missions at night, the trip went smoothly. However, Alucard did spot an Anbu making its way to the Hyuga compound. Thanks to a little hypnotism from Alucard, the gate guards weren't a problem either. After that, the two reached the clearing where the shrine stood. Though he was certain that he had not been here before, Alucard couldn't help but sense that something wasn't quite right with the place. It wasn't the genjutsu that concealed the shrine. Is it possible? Hinata was perplexed when he knelt and put his hand on the ground. Naruto-kun. What are you doing? He pulsed his powers in the ground and said, I'm checking if this place is my birthplace. Hinata was somewhat taken aback. She always thought he was born in Konoha, but apparently she was mistaken. Well, it's where I was born, but what is this? It's much calmer, but it's just as strong as Transylvanian soil. Does that mean I was born here first? Alucard removed a tiny bag that he had brought for Hinata's coffin in case it needed to be replaced. He then added soil to the bag, which he had previously done for Hinata while he was in Konoha. Then he got to his feet. Hinata inquired, is it your birthplace? Hinata squeaked for a moment, lost in her fascination with Alucard's actions and forgetting why she had come. Yes, it is. We haven't much time though. Konoha is already aware of our disappearance and they will send trackers. Didn't we come here for something of yours? She said. Yes, my shrine. Your shrine? He asked, then gave her a slightly amused glance. Despite her pleasant red flush, Hinata responded. You see, Konoha didn't want a grave for you in Konoha, so I made one here. I didn't know why here though, but it was far away enough from Konoha. Now I know why though, it's your birthplace. I also managed to rescue some of your possessions before the villagers destroyed it and decided to place them here as well. So it became a shrine. I see. He then turned to face the shrine and saw many of the items he owned as Naruto. Hinata winced, thinking it might be her jar of medicinal cream. Something doesn't belong here. She disregarded her fears, however, because her heart and mind denied it. Alucard approached the shrine and snapped a picture of his group. Then he tossed it aside and faced Hinata. After Hinata sealed the shrine, she said, now you can take it with you. The two of them then headed for Wave. Although his day had begun so well, Kakashi Hitaki was not happy. He got up early, ate his cereal bowl, and fed his dogs before heading to the monument. He spent 2 hours there conversing with Obito and his sensei. After that, he returned home and spent 2 more hours reading his Icha Icha. After that, he worked out in the morning before heading to his team meeting. Sakura then yelled at him for being late, but he was able to quickly resolve the situation by using the Banshee blocker jutsu on himself. After that, they performed their training regimen, which included teamwork training and some physical activity. After that, he returned home to read some Icha Icha, make his lunch, and feed his dogs. He then allowed Sasuke to replicate all of the jutsu he had copied over the years in order to train him. He trained a little more. He grieved for an additional hour at the memorial stone before reading some more Icha Icha to cap off his day. Overall, the day was pleasant, but 2 things marred it. The first was that he was sent after Hinata after she betrayed the village by leaving with Alucard. The fact that Alucard was his former student was the second thing that spoiled his day. Why had he always had to put up with that monster? He was also troubled by the fact that, despite all of his training, he had once again outperformed Sasuke, but he swiftly brushed those thoughts of betrayal aside. His Sharingan and Sasuke's innate brilliance are too strong for him to overcome. The silver-haired Sharingan user concluded, he must have used some of the demon's power. They didn't anticipate Sasuke's perspective. Then, he would most likely flee, which was not an option. Fortunately, Tsunade was able to identify Alucard as an S-rank secret, so that was no longer an issue. When he reached the Hyuga clan compound, Kakashi was addressed by the 2 guards stationed at the front gate. Kakashi pulled out a scroll and hurled it at the 2 guards, saying, "State your business." The guards opened it and began reading, astonished to see that it bore the designation of an S-rank mission. Kakashi simply nodded and was led to Hinata's room. "You can enter, Hitaki-san. However, we must warn you that using your Sharingan will be seen as an attempt as theft of clan secrets." After that, the other guard reported his daughter's disappearance to his clan head's office. All he could do was hope Heishi would show him mercy. Kakashi simply nodded and went into the room, saying, "This is Hinata-sama's room." He nicked his thumb with his teeth as his first action. Then he pointed his hand at the floor and performed 5 hand signs. Summoning Jutsu. A puff of smoke and symbols on the ground emerged. "Kakashi, why did you summon me?" A small brown dog with dark brown ears and a snout appeared where Kakashi's hand had been. He had on a little blue vest. He had a blue Konoha forehead protector on his head. The copy nin then grinned broadly as he spoke to his partner. The dog sniffed the air slowly and said, "Hello Pakun, I want you to track the girl who lives here. There are 3 different smells. The first is most likely that of the girl Kakashi is trying to find because her scent is everywhere. She walked in through the front door and out the window. Although there is a lot of his chakra in the air, which suggests that he may have used a jutsu, the second is unquestionably male and entered through the door as well. He did not leave in any way. I'm not sure what the third one is, but he is unquestionably not human. Together with the girl, he went out the window and came in through the wall. He took a deep sniff and said, "That can't be right, better check again." Alright, he got in through the wall, which is odd. Pakun took a few extra sniffs, which surprised Kakashi at first because Pakun usually didn't take that long, but he dismissed it as a result of the blood on the floor and his advanced age. But there is something about his scent, something familiar. Pakun thought differently. He shouldn't be here, so it can't be his scent. Even though it isn't very strong, I can't deny that it is his scent. The true query is, should I share this discovery with Kakashi? After giving it some thought, Pakun concluded that Kakashi already had enough issues. Kakashi, I found her trail. She left this room through the window. Time? The masked nin then turned to his guide and said, half an hour. The Hyuga activated his Byakugan and verified that Kakashi had left the room after the copy said, "Thank you for your assistance, but I have everything I need." He then left the room through the window, followed by his ninkin. After turning off his Byakugan, he walked out of the room. A man with his Byakugan activated sat a few rooms away, unknown to the 2 ninja and the ninkin. The man then made his way from his room to his compound's gates. Some Hyuga interrupted him, but he scared them away with a glare. After all, he was a member of the main branch. After that, he left the compound and went down an alley. Over the Hyuga's body, a wave of darkness began to emerge. Then a pale man with blood-red eyes and black hair appeared. Master. Everything went according to plan. Alucard and Hinata were traveling quickly in the direction of waves somewhere in the Land of Fire. The speed they were moving was obviously faster than some Junin he had seen in his memories of Orochimaru, and Alucard was quite pleased with it. Hinata appeared to draw inspiration from his passing, which she used to inform her training. The clone he left at Konoha abruptly sent him some information. As he evaluated the information he had received from his clone, Alucard thought, "They send Kakashi, but I can't believe that he will be alone. They know how strong I am, so they will send some Anbu with him." Since it goes against his vampire nature, the technique he employed was one of the hardest for him to learn and perfect. A vampire typically draws blood and, in certain rare instances, souls from a living thing, but with this method, he actually injects a familiar into a deceased body to bring it back to life. He had only used it twice because of this as well. He reanimated Luke Valentine's body the other time, against Walter. The only difference was that he inserted a familiar that he molded in a copy of himself, as opposed to Walter, who re-injected Luke Valentine into his body and used him to control Luke's body. On his way to the Hyuga compound, Alucard picked up a Hyuga's body. Alucard swiftly bit the man in the neck as he approached it, albeit inebriatedly, and then inserted the familiar while covering his body with 2 layers of shadows. The Hyuga's appearance prior to Alucard's attack was known as the outer layer. Alucard's look was the inward layer. The purpose of the first layer was to let the clone enter the Hyuga compound and search for trackers. The first layer would then be dropped by the clone, causing some mayhem across Konoha. As a result, Alucard could pursue the Akatsuki without worrying about Konoha attacking Wave. However, there were a few issues. The first was that the clone's soul was unable to use the Byakugan or generate chakra. Since the body still had some remaining chakra, the first one wasn't too difficult. Alucard fixed the second one by rapidly teaching his clone how to use his new eyes using the memories of the deceased Hyuga. When Hinata's voice interrupted, Naruto.kun, Alucard's thoughts, he turned to face her. The bulging veins around her eyes told him that the Byakugan was in use. It seems that we are followed by Kakashi, 3 Anbu and a dog. They're at the edge of my vision, which is a bit more than 15 kilometers, but it seems that they're gaining on us. Should we increase our speed? Alucard responded with a calm voice. The game of hunter. Prey began for several hours until Hinata nodded and said, "There is no need for that, just check from time to time the distance between us and inform me until it is less than 1.5 kilometers. Alucard simply smiled and pulled out his Kasul, saying, Naruto.kun, they're 1 kilometer and 200 meters away from us. The Kasul demonstrated its strength in these circumstances. The Kasul specializes in range, but it lacked the Jackal's raw stopping power. It would hit the target without losing accuracy and would still be deadly if you fired at it from a kilometer away. Then, to Hinata's surprise, he stopped and turned around. Then he pulled the trigger, aiming his gun at Kakashi and his group. Somewhat earlier, Kakashi and his team Rat wasn't happy because he thought this would be an easy mission. The plan was straightforward. Kakashi would use his summons to find the pair, then he and Tenzo would fight Alucard while he and Kat captured the Hyuga and brought her back to Konoha. For the payment of an S-rank mission, all he needed to do was knock out a Chunin, level Hyuga and bring her back. It wasn't meant to be, but it would be simple. The pursuit took longer because the targets were traveling at Junin speed. He was growing weary, even though he didn't want to acknowledge it. He was more of an infiltration type, eliminating his opponent with a single, decisive move, rather than having great speed or stamina. However, he wouldn't be dissatisfied, particularly with the current company. The first was the sword Mirage of Konoha, whose Kenjutsu was feared by all the elemental nations. Her purple hair and feminine figure made her easy to identify. The second's short brown hair, which was typical of Konoha, made him less identifiable. However, he recognized him as Tenzo, the wood release wielder, because he had previously collaborated with this Anbu. Some said his use of the wood jutsu was so good that it could compete with the Shodems. The final one was Kakashi no Sharingan, a fourth Hokage student and Sharingan wielder. Being surrounded by such legends made him feel a little out of place, but understanding the opposition was essential. Alucard, the monster without chakra, and the Impaler of Wave. Despite being the perfect example of what a ninja should not be, he was able to defeat S-rank ninja and go on to conquer a nation. Abruptly, the team's tracker began to speak. It seems that they have stopped running. Rat was unfazed by this small piece of information. They would likely plan an ambush or something after realizing they couldn't outrun them. It was normal. The Anbu suddenly experienced intense pain. Then he felt a moist, hot sensation spread across his torso. He was certain that it was blood of his blood, specifically. He noticed a hole where his liver should have been when he looked down. He was aware that he was about to pass away. After assessing his life, he concluded that everything no longer seemed to matter. Rat's final words, which will go down in Anbu's sordid past, were, "The only thing that I regret was not making up with my brother." Blood. The trio of ninja who were pursuing the no-life king immediately dove into the trees by the side of the road as soon as they smelled that liquid. The silver-haired team leader, who had fired his partner due to the danger, was signed in formal Anbu sign language by the purple-haired female member of the trio. "Senpai, what was that?" Kakashi signed back to his team, "I don't know." Tenzo, a brown-haired Anbu, suggested, "It might be one of those kunai launchers." The group's female member, whose real name was Azuki Yugo, commented, "If we secure one of those weapons, we would have a serious advantage over our enemies." "Let's focus on the mission first. Rat is dead, so how are we going to do this?" crashed into Kakashi. "We still do the original matchup. I can take her on, myself." "Okay. Let's do this." The three of them leapt through the forest in the direction of Alucard and Hinata, who were waiting for them. Alucard told Kakashi, "You're late, Kakashi. I had expected you earlier." Kakashi replied with an eye smile, "Sorry, but I got lost on the road of life." This caused his teammates to perspire, and the Count made the following remark. "Still those same excuses, Kakashi." Kakashi retorted, "You've gotten bigger, Naruto." Tenzo and Yugo were both taken aback by this revelation, with Yugo muttering that there were no good demons. With icy rage, Alucard said, "Cease the act. I know that you always hated me." "How can you say that?" Kakashi asked, his pain evident in his voice, but the Nosferatu was unconvinced. "Like you tried to get me killed by pawning me off on Ebisu, so that Neji could easily kill me, and if that didn't work, you still had Sasuke and his Chidori." Kakashi told his former pupil, Naruto, "I had to teach Sasuke the Chidori since he had to fight Gaara." Kakashi then chose to use his trump card in this verbal duel. "Don't try that on me. You are rumored to have 1,000 jutsu. I know you have some jutsu to penetrate Gaara's defense, and even if it didn't work he could just forfeit. He would be promoted anyway since he is the last loyal Uchiha." "Naruto, I never thought that you were the Kyuubi." Hinata was perplexed because, thanks to her Byakugan, she could now plainly see that Kakashi was telling the truth. Mentally, Kakashi was happy that his plan had succeeded when he saw that confusion. Then he would pretend to betray the village. Then he would put a Chidori through Naruto's heart to kill him. However, the following words destroyed that small plan. Hinata was even more perplexed by the statement, "Instead you hate me for causing the death of my father." How could he have done anything to his father when he had been an orphan since birth? Kakashi spat venom at him, saying, "You don't have the right to call yourself his son." Kakashi became even more enraged when Alucard dismissed him, saying, "Like I care about that fool." Hinata was so frustrated that she finally asked what the fuss was about. "Shut up, Minato. Sensei was a great man, don't you dare disgrace his memory." Hinata had many potential responses to the question, "Who are you talking about?" But she never would have predicted the response that Alucard provided. Minato Namikaze, also known as the Yondaime Hokage, or the man who sealed the Kyuubi into his son. But if he was your father, then why would he seal the Kyuubi into you? Hinata was shocked to learn that his own father had sentenced his own son to a life of agony in order to provide his village with a weapon. The Yondaime Hokage knew that Konoha needed a weapon, and since he was a righteous fool, he chose me since he couldn't ask for someone else's son. He had other options, but that would leave Konoha without their bija. "Hinata, you know what to do." Hinata simply nodded before sprinting through the forest in Wave's direction. No one in the opposition attempted to pursue the girl. Alucard simply positioned himself after taking Kabikari-Bacha in both hands. With her own sword drawn, Kat charged Alucard. Kat simply blocked his sword swing, but she had to direct as much chakra into her limbs as she could. Then, Alucard saw another cat charging in his direction, but he was so aware of his inner eye that he recognized it right away as a typical clone. The clone then phased through Alucard after he left him alone. The other two, who were also making a lot of hand signs, weren't sitting around doing nothing. Wind style. Wind cannon. After inhaling deeply, Kakashi blasted an elephant-sized ball of wind in Alucard's direction. Tenzo then spat out water in the same shape and size as Kakashi's wind sphere, saying, "Water style. Gunshot." The jutsu then fused into a two-layered sphere that was even larger and faster. The exterior of water and the interior of wind. When Alucard saw this, he smiled and let some Kabikari-Bacha, which had been pressed up against Kat's katana, turn into blood. Because there wasn't enough force, Kat unintentionally slid her sword into the opening. Alucard then effectively trapped Kat by channeling his blood into Kabikari-Bacha. After that, the two sword fighters were absorbed in the teamwork jutsu. The male of the pair was then pushed several meters away until the jutsu collapsed due to a lack of chakra, while the female vanished in a puff of smoke. He only avoided being a bloodstain because he made his regeneration start while the jutsu was destroying his body. However, he was not unharmed. His coat, hat, and glasses were destroyed, leaving him only in his charcoal suit, which clung to him through the boots and the water. His orange eyes gleamed with malevolent glee, and his hair was dripping. The two shinobi were actually deterred from fighting him by the sight. Kakashi mentally attacked Alucard in an attempt to level the playing field. Alucard could see his intentions clearly and remained silent when he asked, "You do realize that Hinata is being chased by Kat?" After realizing that his first attack had failed, Kakashi attempted to prod further. "You do realize that she doesn't stand a chance, do you?" Alucard commented, "I think that I'm a better judge of that." With Hinata using her Byakugan, Hinata ran through the woods until she came to a clearing. She also noticed that, as Alucard had intended, the Anbu was pursuing her. She recalled what he and Naruto had discussed. Backward, she said, "You want me to run away?" With an underlying sense of sadness that he believed she lacked the strength to protect herself. Hinata became excited upon hearing that, believing she was strong enough to battle an A-rank shinobi. "Yes, since you're the target of the mission but I'm the stronger of the two, they will have to split up. Since I'm perceived S-ranked, they will leave two members with me as a distraction and one will be following you to capture you." The bingo book she took from an iwa.nin was where she found that information. Then she gave it some thought. The fact that they were Konoha.ninja helped a lot, and she had already been desensitized during a C-rank mission, so she asked without hesitation, "That's why you killed that one Anbu? You wanted to make sure that I had only one opponent, but why not kill them all?" The Count replied, "Morale." Hinata simply looked perplexed. Although she is aware that morale was a key factor in winning battles, she did not comprehend Alucard's behavior. How would make it a difference if you killed them then or later? If I killed them from a long distance, they would think assassinated. It would make them think that I'm just a coward that can only beat big opponents from far away. But if I would defeat their strongest operatives besides the Hokage in direct combat, it would severely decrease morale. Hinata nodded with comprehension. Alucard smiled and uttered. It was Hinata who smiled slightly and said, "Good, now remember to make this plan work efficiently, you will have to kill your opponent with clear signs that you did it. This will make them doubt themselves even more." When Alucard noticed the smile, he raised an eyebrow and said, "I understand." Alucard's smile slightly expanded as he said, "It appears that I've corrupted her even more than expected." Good. End flashback. He was correct. Only shinobi were trailing, and Hinata recognized the Anbu as Konoha's sword Mirage using the details from the bingo book she had stolen. She is an A-rank shinobi who mostly employs fire and earth jutsu, though she also occasionally employs lightning jutsu. However, her kenjutsu was more well-known than her ninjutsu. It tricked her opponents into giving her or her clones an opening by using both normal and shadow clones. She was also said to be able to channel chakra with her sword. Knowing she couldn't hide from Hinata's Byakugan, Kat then made her way to the clearing. Hinata simply activated her Byakugan and assumed a stance, saying, "Hinata Hyuga, you are hereby charged with treason, surrender or die." Kat simply evaluated her opponent in her mind. As a Chunin of Konoha, Hinata Hyuga lacks proficiency in ninjutsu and injutsu, and her genjutsu is only moderate. Low. Chunin to high. Genin levels. She was promoted through field promotion. Since she is unable to use normal clones, Kat knew that her regular kenjutsu would be overkill and only half as effective. She then went over a few hand signals. Lightning style. Electric net. She then spread her hands apart, revealing 10 lightning balls with a lightning arc connecting each pair. As the lightning net grew closer to Hinata, it was hurled from the cat's grasp. The net was cut in two by Hinata's simple sweeping motion, which sent out a chakra arc. The net then passed harmlessly by as Hinata charged Kat. On her way to hand seals, the female Anbu avoided the remaining chakra arc. She then spat out flames that were too wide for Hinata to sidestep, so she leapt to give Kat more space. Fire style. Great fireball jutsu. She took advantage of this by drawing her sword and using it to channel lightning chakra. In response, Hinata adopted a slightly more defensive posture. After that, Kat ran over to the Hyuga and attempted to kill her. With the palm of her hand, Hinata swatted her sword away, intercepting it. She applied chakra to her hands to protect herself from electrocution. Then Yugo slashed horizontally, causing a crouch in return. The flat of Kat's sword then deflected Hinata's palm strike that was intended for her heart. Then Hinata struck again, this time at the throat. Yugo had to leap back, and she used the brief moment she had to assess her opponent. Low. Chunin to high. Genin. She is even more skilled than some Junin in combat. Who composes those assessments? Then she noticed something that startled her. Hinata was using hand signals, which she knew were for the water style, water barrage. A ninjutsu. Using Hyuga. The cat had never witnessed a Hyuga employing jutsu before. She had to seal her sword in a storage seal on her glove before she could properly prepare herself, despite her surprise, by going through a series of hand signs. Then Hinata spit a volley of fast-moving water spheres at her adversary. After that, Yugo completed her jutsu defense. Kat encircled herself with an earth dome and said, "Earth style, earth dome." Then, without causing any harm to the dome, the water spheres crashed into it. You could see the Anbu breathing heavily inside the dome. 3 jutsu, chakra flow, and a shadow clone take care of that, but she wasn't a top Anbu for nothing. She realized that something was obviously wrong when she saw that her right hand was leaking chakra. Then she became aware that her earth dome was slightly larger and more robust than usual. Then she had an epiphany. That little bitch has been playing me all along. When she made contact with my sword, she used her soft fist to forcefully open my tenketsu, forcing me to use ninjutsu to use up even more chakra. It's feasible because my sword conducts chakra, but it takes a lot of skill to channel elemental chakra through a sword and open tenketsu. I will kill that little bastard who wrote such a faulty file when I get back from this mission. She was aware that she had 2 main options. Either she could try to overpower Hinata with her most potent techniques, or she could prolong this match by using as little chakra as possible, giving Kat enough time to trap Hinata. Then, directly behind her, Kat felt Hinata. She would most likely take advantage of the Earth Dome's lack of vision. Then she unshielded her sword, choosing option 2. After allowing her Earth Dome to collapse, Kat assumed the position for her most potent kenjutsu move. She then charged Hinata while creating 5 shadow clones, who in turn charged the blue-haired female, chanting, "Dance of the Rising Full Moon." Hinata's chakra arcs could only eliminate 4 of them. Then she palm struck one of the 2 surviving cats. Regretfully, it was also a clone. The real one took advantage of the situation and hit her in the heart. Hinata's mouth was gushing blood. With another S rank under her belt, Yugo grinned. Poof. Yugo was so taken aback by Hinata's disappearance in a puff of smoke that she was unprepared for the next assault. She struck after saying, 9 circles of hell, 6th circle, 64 palms. She opened 2 tenketsu and said, 2 palms. 4 palms, then 2 more were opened. 8 palms. Another 4, 16 palms, an additional 8. 30.2 palms. 16 more palms opened, 60, 4 palms. She then opened 30.2 more tenketsu, bringing her total to 60. 4. The final blow then blew Kat away as chakra began to flow from her body. She was producing so much chakra that it began to show. Kat was unconscious in a matter of seconds. Then Hinata approached the unconscious woman and pulled out a kunai. She burned the remainder of the body after severing the head with it. She was confident that Tsunade could examine the body and learn the methods she employed. Hinata didn't want that, either. Should I tear off his head or his spine? Was among the ideas running through the Count's mind while he observed his rivals. A silver-haired man in the typical Junin uniform was one of them. The man's headband and face mask kept most of his face hidden. His right eye was all that was visible of his face. A brown-haired man in the Anbu uniform was his comrade. He wore an animal mask that resembled a cat's face with red and green stripes. Both men were tense, and the 2 shinobi would strike anything that moved. Conversely, the Count sat in a relaxed manner. The wind collaboration jutsu he was struck by left his clothes and hair damp. He didn't care that the jutsu also took away his hat, coat, and glasses. Kakashi then initiated the battle by attempting a lightning jutsu. The water would make it even more efficient. A lightning hound was created and aimed at Alucard with the goal of frying him. Lightning style, lightning hound. Taking out his Kasul, Alucard fired multiple bullets at Kakashi, but they were easily sidestepped. The lightning dog dispersed due to the lack of focus, and Tenzo was also making a number of hand signs. Earth style. Earth spears. Several earth-based spears were hurled quickly in Alucard's direction. Before each spear could reach the Count shot back. At that moment, the 2 shinobi realized they needed to exert all of their strength. Kakashi's Sharingan was visible as he removed his headband. So I see that you're taking me serious, but it's not like that I can help you, the Count responded. In an attempt to scare the Count, Kakashi commented, many have said that before, they all died by my hand. This would be a good fight, the Count simply grinned. The Count was certain that they couldn't compete with his level 2 release, even though the 2 were unquestionably stronger than his regular form and possibly even his level 3 release. Thus, he made the decision to lift those 2 limitations. Release Control Art Restriction System, Levels 3 and 2. When Alucard unleashed his power on the world, Kakashi and his Anbu partner were cautious because there was no prior evidence that he had done so, so his abilities were currently unknown. Alucard then made the decision to transform himself into mist using his newfound freedom. In the black particles, his limbs first formed, followed by his torso and head. To no avail, both shinobi attempted to dispel a genjutsu. Then the 2 shinobi were crawled toward by the black mist. Assuming the worst, Tenzo performed a series of hand signs, the final one being a clasping of his hands, which gave the impression that he was praying. Wood style. Wood dome. The Anbu and his captain were then encircled by a wooden dome. Until the dome was in the middle of the mist, it continued to crawl forward. The mist covered area was a circle with a 100-meter radius. Kakashi stood inside the dome and cursed in his head. Damn, he chose to imitate my strategy after witnessing my battles with Zabuza. This mist shouldn't be an issue normally because the Sharingan can see chakra, and since this mist doesn't contain any chakra and he doesn't have any, he is invisible in it. Tenzo, on the other hand, created a wood clone and sent it outside to see if the mist was toxic. He was informed in his mind by the clone that the mist was not toxic. He was about to receive additional information from the clone when Alucard shot him. The 2 then moved in the direction of the gunshot using mole jutsu, like concealment, but they were unable to locate anything. When Kakashi and Tenzo realized that Alucard had the upper hand in the mist, they attempted to push it away, but to their astonishment, it remained in their immediate vicinity. It dawned on them then that the mist was indeed pursuing them. Tenzo built a wooden dome to protect them before they emerged from the earth. Tenzo whispered, Senpai, can't you track him with your sense of smell? The silver-haired nin commented, no, even my dogs can't track him in the mist because the mist contains his smell. Alucard was having a great time. He hadn't played hide and seek in a while. He always smiled when he played the game. Unfortunately, his playmates weren't very good at it. At the moment, his body was nothing but mist. He was only a portion of the mist, not the whole thing. Then he straightened up, pulled out his jackal, and fired twice at the dome. The wooden dome was destroyed by the first shot, and both Nin's heads were blown up by the second. Kakashi's body turned into a pool of water, while Tenzo's turned brown, demonstrating that he was a wood clone. Alucard then made the decision to change into a mist and blend in with the surrounding mist. Then, because the mist obscured his vision as well, he looked for the pair through it. It did not, however, obstruct his other senses. Then, with ease, he located Tenzo and Kakashi by the side of the road in the woods, where they were making plans. Then he pulled out Kabikariba Cha after reforming himself. He attempted to cut the shinobi in two with his sword, but Tenzo and Kakashi weren't just elite shinobi. It was a narrow escape from the blade. After that, the two quickly went over a few hand signs. Two-toothed wooden clamps rose from the ground in an attempt to break Alucard's neck. Wood style. Giant bear trap. Alucard simply leapt back. Fire style. Phoenix flower jutsu. Kakashi then exhaled a number of fireballs, which he directed in the direction of the Count, past the bear trap. After that, Alucard swung his sword in an attempt to put out the fireballs, but Kakashi was able to get some past his defense and strike Alucard in the face. Then, in a shower of black mist, Alucard exploded. Tenzo asked, "A clone? How is that possible? He has no chakra." Kakashi was unable to respond. Because of the chase, his excessive use of the Sharingan, and all the jutsu he had to perform, he was low on chakra. But it was all they could do. Genjutsu wasn't effective, and close quarters fighting was suicide. This mist and his clone demonstrated that he had little to no response to the arts of ninjutsu, despite the fact that his lack of chakra also suggested this. Only one plan, not a very good one, but adequate, came to his weary mind. Tenzo simply nodded and covered themselves with a wooden dome. "Tenzo, I can take care of this mist, giving you the opening necessary, but afterwards I will be useless, so it will be your only chance. I also need some time, can you give it to me?" Tenzo said. Kakashi interpreted it as a cue to get his jutsu ready. He began to gradually transform his Sharingan into his Mangekyo Sharingan by channeling chakra in it. Tenzo began gathering chakra in order to get his jutsu ready. Tenzo nodded and let go of the dome after saying, "Tenzo, I'm ready." Then, aiming his largest Kamui at the mist, Kakashi swiftly dispelled it. A massive vacuum was created by this action, and it was soon filled with air and the black mist that Alucard had produced. Tenzo could see his opponent clearly without the mist clouding his vision. The stump that should have been his left arm was obviously bleeding. The Anbu then used his most powerful technique at the bleeding count. It appears that Senpai's technique tore off his arm. That was a lucky shot, but lucky shots count as well. Wood style. Wood dragon. Tenzo threw a huge dragon at Alucard with amazing speed. It was still regarded as an S-rank jutsu, despite not being as powerful as the first Hokage's wood dragon. For the most part, Alucard was able to avoid the wooden beast. It tore his other arm from his body after grazing it. The Konoha shinobi then joined him as he fell to the ground. They both used up too much chakra, but not enough to knock them out. With a hint of joy and a sense of resignation that he would die, the Anbu said, "Luckily, we saved Konoha." After hearing the remark, Alucard couldn't contain his laughter. The man who had lost both of his arms was laughing as if it didn't matter, which startled the two Konoha shinobi. Kakashi made the decision to remark on this minor topic. As he approached Kakashi and Yamamoto, Alucard said, "Why are you laughing? You have no arms." Even Orochimaru couldn't take vengeance on Konoha in this state. His blood was still flowing from his body because he was without arms. He then regenerated his arms, evoking the terrified looks that he obviously enjoyed. "You think that this will stop me? I have shown many things that people have considered impossible. This is no exception." He then demonstrated to the shinobi that he was completely recovered by moving his fingers slowly. The wood user muttered, "Impossible." Alucard simply grabbed him by the neck and uttered. Then he bit Tenzo in the neck, obtaining all of his memories, including details about Konoha's defense mechanisms, some of their private secrets, and other things. "As I just said, I have shown many things that people have considered impossible. This is no exception." Tenzo's body then fell to the ground as the vampire let gravity take over. After that, he started to walk in Kakashi's direction, but a woman's arrival stopped him. When he saw the person who had arrived, Kakashi thought it was Kat, but his hopes were dashed when he saw her hair. The hair was blue. How can this be? She is only a low to mid-shunin, but Kat is an Anbu. Kat couldn't have lost. Then he noticed something in the left hand of the female Hyuga. It was a Hida, specifically, Cat's head. Since her Anbu mask was no longer covering her face, Hinata was holding the head by its hair, exposing it. His eye told him otherwise, but he couldn't believe it. One of Konoha's best Anbu, Yuga Oizuki, also called Cat, had been successfully killed by Hinata. Alucard jerked Kakashi out of his reverie. Hinata cocked her head to the side and asked, somewhat bewildered, "You're just in time, Hinata." Kakashi was just about to lose consciousness. Alucard simply grinned and asked, "Why is that bad? Isn't he going to die anyway?" "Death would be too kind for him, besides we would need a witness for your kill anyway." The girl asked, "So he will go scot-free?" With a sparkle in his eyes, the Count remarked, "Of course not, and I have the perfect thing in mind." It was this glint that scared Kakashi. He was not afraid of many things, but this one frightens him to no end. Alucard simply moved to stand in front of Kakashi's face before crouching down. He had his sights set on Kakashi's Sharingan eye. When Kakashi noticed where Alucard was concentrating, he started to wriggle. Alucard was obviously enjoying the moment as he simply moved his hand slowly in the direction of the eye. When Kakashi started to cry, his hand was now right in front of his eye. The Junin whimpered, "Please, don't do it, it was his final gift, have mercy." "Why would I have mercy on you when you didn't have mercy on me?" Alucard simply ignored it. After pushing his fingers behind Kakashi's Sharingan, he started to slowly remove it. He positioned the Sharingan eye in front of Kakashi's good eye after it was fully detached from his skull. Then, to make Kakashi's suffering even worse, Alucard began to squeeze the Sharingan at an agitating pace. Then he crushed the eye, and the emotional shock caused Kakashi to faint. Kakashi no Sharingan had vanished. Jiraiya was running in the direction of the recently created clearing. It was easy to locate, simply follow the fight's leftover chakra. He still thought they might have survived, but it was not very comforting that he had not yet crossed Kakashi and Yamamoto. It was no accident that they were the two best shinobi in Konoha. When he finally reached the clearing, he saw Tenzo's lifeless body alongside Kakashi's still living one. The head of a purple-haired woman Jiraiya recognized as Yugo was a little farther away. He went right away to check Kakashi's condition. The absence of an eye was the first thing he noticed. Jiraiya collected some fire chakra in his finger and cauterized the wound because he knew he couldn't stop the bleeding from the retinal artery into the eye socket. As he carried Kakashi on his back, he sealed the two corpses into a scroll. He was instantly afraid of the hurt that would result from the talk he would have with Tsunade. Damn that brat! And the suffering it caused. The closest person, who was Jiraiya at the time, was the target of Tsunade's ire after Jiraiya reported back to her. You could see him in a dent in the wall right now. Then, still a little dazed from the blow, Jiraiya slowly emerged from the hole. Tsunade simply disregarded it. Not did that brat stole a Byakugan, he also killed Tenzo and removed Kakashi's Sharingan. Now the other nations have an advantage, since we can't neutralize their Jincha, Riki anymore. Jiraiya continued, still in shock. It doesn't help that they were our top 3 shinobi either. Those 3 were powerful, though not as powerful as he was, but they could defeat him if he didn't enter Sage mode. It doesn't really matter because the last one lost a lot of his power and 2 of them are now dead. All by his 2-month pupil, Naruto Uzumaki. In just 3 years, his power increased dramatically. If they hadn't thrown it out of fear, it might have been theirs, but that was in the past, and there was nothing he could do about it now. He tried to prevent him from destroying Konoha, but it was more difficult said than done. In the books, he unmistakably positioned himself as an S-rank nin. He is also a daimyo, and a well-connected one at that. His actions at Kiri will draw the attention of Spring and Tea Country, even though he was only currently allied with Suna. Jiraiya knew that their attempts to use Hinata to manipulate Naruto and win her back through political means would fail. The Toad Sanin commented, "Speaking of Kakashi, how is he doing? It's not that he really cared about politics in the past and I don't think that will have changed." Tsunade just stated. "The damage wasn't life-threatening after you cauterized the wound, Sakura should be done by now." With that, they headed to the hospital. Good, Kakashi will have some information on him. Inside a Mount Myoboku storeroom that had multiple shelves and boxes containing scrolls and other Toad-owned artifacts, someone asked, "Where is that blasted scroll?" There were 2 toads in the storeroom. A male and a female. Shima was a pale green toad with purple hair, and Fukasaku, the male, was a green toad with gray hair and a goatee. Each of them wore a cape with a high collar. Then Shima stated, "Calm down, Pa. I still don't know how that senile toad even remembered that this scroll existed, but he said that it was important, so it is. I know, Ma. But why would he want the scroll of the summoners? We have much more detailed tracking system, replied the older toad. Shima pulled out a scroll that resembled the toad's summoning contract, saying, I don't know, but I found the scroll. Then, with a gasp, Shima opened it. Then Fukasaku leapt over to Shima, examined the scroll, and read its perplexing contents. Naruto Uzumaki, status. Alive, moving. How is that possible? He was executed years ago. Ma responded by asking. Pa examined the scroll and the seals on it, thinking, maybe are the seals not working? And how did his name get in that scroll? It hasn't been used for more than 20 years. One of the functions of the summoning contract was to add a new summoner's name to the scroll of the summoners. We added an additional function system to our new tracking system when we first started using it because it was simpler than changing the function, and it appears that seals are still functioning correctly. However, how is it possible that he was put to death? Pa simply grimaced. Shima nodded and said, I don't know, but we have to inform the Great Toad Sage about it. They then went off with the scroll to the sleeping Great Toad Sage, a wrinkled brown toad with a white belly, as big as the boss summon, Gamabunta, and wearing a professor's hat with an orb on top of it and a necklace with the kanji for oil on it. He opened his eyes slightly when he felt the two sages enter and spoke to the. What has brought you here, Shima and Fukasaku? With a bow, Fukasaku uttered. The Great Toad Sage scratched his head and cocked his head to the side, saying, we found the scroll. What scroll? Shima and Fukasaku both started to perspire. The scroll you requested that we obtain. The scroll of the summoners is familiar to you, Shima exclaimed. Oh, I see. Did that scroll raise any issues? When the Great Toad Sage was asked, Fukasaku responded this time. The Great Toad Sage furrowed his brows and said, yes, it states that Naruto Uzumaki is alive, while he died 3 years ago. Uzumaki Naruto. Who is he? Pa's response was, Naruto Uzumaki was our latest summoner. Yes, Gamabunta did tell me about him. He liked him a lot. How did he end up? He was put to death for injuring the final Uchiha. As it turned out, he was executed for being a Jincha, Riki, which was odd because he was the target of a retrieval mission. The Toad Sage's squint shrank slightly. Where had Jiraiya gone? The Toads thought of themselves and their summoners as family, and they helped each other out. Naruto Uzumaki knew this instinctively, and he demonstrated it when he shielded Gamakichi from Shukaku when he accidentally summoned him. Gamabunta declared Naruto Uzumaki a member of the Toad family the moment he extracted that little fact from his son. He may have been incompetent at the time, but he had the Toad's spirit within him, and incompetence can be easily cured by hard training. Therefore, if Jiraiya had done nothing to help the young boy, he would have dishonored the Toad clan, and the Toads didn't like to be dishonored. The true question is how Naruto survived, but he was preoccupied with finding information about Orochimaru and Akatsuki. However, we would have seen him on our summoner tracking scroll, if he had lived. Perhaps he didn't make it out alive, but somehow he was brought back to life? Like the Tensai Edo. The couple was then interrupted by the Great Toad Sage, who said, maybe, but either way it is a matter that must be addressed by us. He is still a member of the Toad clan. The giant toad then summoned the summoning contract without hand signs and carefully placed his index finger on Naruto Uzumaki's entry. A substance then started to ooze out of the glands of the Great Toad Sage. The two other sages knew that substance. It was a special type of toad oil that made it easier to draw nature chakra, which was used for sage chakra, out of the air. The toad then used this oil to make so much sage chakra that Shima and Fukasaku deemed it impossible until today. If you looked at their faces you would see astonishment and awe. The Great Toad Sage then used the gathered sage chakra to track Naruto by the sample of blood. He didn't track Naruto's blood, no, instead he tracked the soul. The Toad Sage was as expected very wise and knew that blood, just as chakra, were connected to the soul. He used this connection to track Naruto's soul. He eventually found the soul, but it looked like it blended in with a lot of other souls. He couldn't determine how many, but it was a lot. He then started to feel weary, a side effect of using so much sage chakra. He eventually fell asleep, but not before saying, "He's in wave country," I said. When he lost consciousness, the two elders were initially concerned, but that was stopped when they heard a loud snore. Fukasaku then said, a small smile spreading across his face. "Oh, wave country. It seems reasonable to me that Naruto has taken over as the new daimyo, or count. Tomorrow, it will travel to wave country." Ma knew it was a weak excuse, but she really didn't want him to leave. But Pa, you won't be on time for lunch that way. She knew that Pa was strong, but even with his current strength, Naruto is only a rank. Pa tried to reassure her that he was strong. Ma, it must be done. On this issue, we cannot afford to waste time. All right, but you'll return for dinner. He began to drool a little when he heard those words. I will even make your favorite dish. Ma was still a superb chef, but her onigiri with larva was a gift from heaven. Kakashi, you were severely beaten. What happened? The sound came from a room in Konoha's hospital, where Jiraiya and Tsunade were standing next to a Kakashi who was lying in bed staring at the ceiling. Both Sani knew that something was wrong with him because he wasn't reading his Icha. The Cyclops answered in a monotone. Jiraiya and Tsunade heard them say, Cat, Tenzo and Rat got killed by them. I only survived on a whim. It seemed that Hinata had assisted in some way, but her files made it very evident that she was a low Chunin level shinobi who would only cause trouble in the battle. Jiraiya was the one who brought this to their attention. You don't mean him? Kakashi's response clearly surprised them. No, Hinata Hyuga killed Cat on her own. The Hyuga must have truly concealed her skills, but if she was able to conceal them from the entire village, including the Hyuga clan, what else could she have concealed? Hinata's ability to defeat Yugo on her own implied that she was at least low Junin. What? Tsunade was ordered to explain. The strategy was straightforward. Cat and Rat would swiftly defeat Hinata while Tenzo and I would divert Naruto. Rat was killed before we were even a kilometer away from them, so the plan was doomed to fail. How? They could be feared globally, especially with the Byakugan, if they could replicate that technique, Tsunade was asked. Jiraiya whistled, one of his weapons. A weapon that combines speed, power, range, and accuracy could transform the shinobi world. Tsunade ignored him when he said, that's one hell of a weapon. What took place next? The two nodded. Given the information, it would be a wise plan for Naruto to send away Hinata knowing he couldn't defend against the three of them. We continued the same plan, so Cat made a shadow clone while she hid. Kakashi went on. After that, we faced Naruto. I attempted to convince him that I was on his side, but he was able to see right through me. He is even aware of his ancestry. The two then exclaimed in shock. What? Not only would they lose more missions as a result of the drama at Kiri, but they would also become the laughing stock of the hidden villages if Naruto Uzumaki leaked this small piece of information. Jiraiya considered it and concluded, yes, he knows, I don't know how but he does. The Kyuubi must have told him, there was nobody else who could have known and told him. What took place next? Then, as intended, Naruto banished Hinata. As her clone charged Naruto, Cat trailed behind her. We sent a wind. Water collaboration jutsu using the provided distraction, and it struck the clone and Naruto. You could see their eyes threatening to fall out of their sockets if you could look at them. The clone was destroyed, but Naruto only lost his coat, hat, and glasses. You're telling me that he took on a wind water collaboration jutsu head-on, without any significant damage. Kakashi didn't say anything. Continue. I chose to make fun of him in an attempt to get him to make a mistake, but it didn't work. He went on to disclose that he wore seals that restricted his authority. To say that they were taken aback would be to say that Jiraiya was a common pervert, which would be a huge understatement. You're telling me that he had little strength when he fought you? This was concerning because Wave's reports made no mention of seals. It might have been that he had released them prior to the fight, but she had a gut feeling that this was not the case. With no emotion in his voice, Kakashi explained, yes, he even only released 2 of the 3 seals and even then crushed the 2 of us. How? The brat made a mistake by demonstrating that his power could be sealed. If he could take control of those seals, he could force him to submit to Konoha's will. Any information he would gather could be used against him, Jiraiya said. He began using the silent killing technique after somehow producing some black mist. Ultimately, I attempted to eliminate the majority of the mist using a gigantic kamui. The remaining mist would be drawn in by the vacuum that was created. Tenzo would take advantage of the gap to eliminate him. The kamui tore off his arm, performing even better than anticipated. After that, Tenzo unleashed his wood dragon on him, destroying his other arm. Tsunade appeared to be celebrating her birthday, and he was weakened to the point of being easily defeated. She yelled, so, he is armless right now, we can use it to attack. However, Kakashi's response surprised her. He began to shake in terror and yell. No. He simply chuckled at us and quickly restored them both. Then he killed Tenzo by biting him in the neck. Kakashi, who was still shaking, began to hyperventilate. It was then Hinata returned together with Kat's severed head. Naruto then came to me and Enda. Tsunade used a strategically placed medical chakra to knock him out. They had no idea that a man was planning. He was standing in what could be called a bunker. Orochimaru had numerous bases, including the bunker. The man was examining the numerous research specimens and inventions spread out across the base. He has to concede that Orochimaru was a genius for keeping them intact for so long without any visitors. Something caught the man's attention. His crimson eyes gleamed in the darkness. They won't even know what hit them. The man noticed something even more intriguing when he turned to his right. Then he flashed his fangs in a smile. Tomorrow, the clone will enjoy himself. When the Anbu told Shikaku Nara that there was an emergency council meeting, he responded, troublesome. It was far too early for a council meeting. It was 8 o'clock. Hinata Hyuga's defection was the obvious reason for the emergency meeting. Additionally, he could conclude that the defection was successful because Konoha was still alive and the men who were pursuing her were dealt with, most likely dead. The likelihood of receiving new information on Alucard was the only thing that wasn't too problematic. He still hasn't figured out the puzzle of the Count. He learned a few things about him, such as who he was and some of his skills, but nothing really eye-opening. Since upsetting the current Hokage is simply too problematic, he then made the decision to attend the meeting. He saw his fellow council members when he got to the meeting. All except Heishi Hyuga appeared fine. Given that he had to cope with Hinata's defection, Heishi was inevitable. The Hyuga who defected wasn't just any Hyuga. It was a Hyuga with the knowledge to activate a caged bird seal. For the Hyuga clan, this is the worst situation. The fact that she was shielded by an S-class ninja who was impervious to Juken didn't help. The thought of the repercussions was too upsetting. At that moment, Tsunade walked in frowning into the room. The late Inoichi Yamanaka's wife, Yana Yamanaka, spoke to the Hokage. With a slightly deeper frown, Tsunade asked, Hokage Sama, why did you call us? Silence prevailed as the majority of the members attempted to comprehend this small piece of information. Councilman, I have some bad news. We have discovered Alucard Shitsuki's real identity. He was none other than Naruto Uzumaki. Danzo was the first to do it. The Warhawk asked, it makes sense, but what proof do you have? Shikaku, not Tsunade, responded. Danzo and the council members nodded, and Kaharu continued, saying, it's just the sum of small things. His displeasure with Konoha, his actions in Wave, his interactions with Gaara. I would tell more but that would be too troublesome. The others nodded, but Shikaku didn't and said, now we know this, we can use this information against him. Tsunade moaned in her head, it isn't that easy. He made sure that we couldn't by removing it from the village. She knew that this needed to be addressed, but she hoped she could put it off a little while longer. What did he remove from our village? The Hyuga clan chief replied, my daughter. Except for Tsunade and Shikaku, who were already aware of this, the council was baffled by this. It was no small task for him to sneak into Konoha and capture a member of the Hyuga clan. They shuddered. Are they going to be next? So it seems that he has kidnapped the heir Hyuga clan. We can use this in the political world and reduce his standing, Hamaru said. Although the news wasn't welcome, it wasn't shocking. Technically he didn't kidnap her, she went willingly. The Warhawk, Danzo, who was always wary, then inquired. Are we certain of this? It could be a ploy from Kumo to acquire a Byakugan. When we learned that she had defected, we sent out a squad that included Hitaki Kakashi, Anbu Tenzo, Anbu Cat, and Anbu Rat. They eventually caught up to them, but at the expense of Anbu Rat. The rest of the squad then managed to separate the two. Kakashi and Tenzo fought the Count, while Hinata confronted and killed Anbu Cat, also known as Azuki Yugo. The council was in a frenzy when she defeated one of their best shinobi despite being the weakest member of her age group. How she did that? She is just a chunin, a weak one at that, while Yugo is one of our best shinobi? Asked Yana. Shikaku gave her a look and uttered. Tsunade then interrupted, saying, she probably hid her skills, troublesome. Sume then began to believe that although she wasn't as intelligent as Inara, she did have a working brain. We also suspected that she hid more than just her strength, but the question, what did she hid as well and why? Aside from her abilities, she could conceal a few things, but one thing caught her eye. The council members gave it some thought and couldn't help but agree that it was very believable, but it didn't help because nearly everyone had harmed the demon in some way. What if she wanted revenge on the ones who hurt the demon? We all know that she had a thing for him. Shikaku once again displayed his brilliance. Sasuke was the most likely, but Sakura confused the counselors. Get us Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno and give them a physical evaluation. Hamaru made the decision to express those ideas. The Uchiha is a given since he executed the demon, but why the Haruno? Sume, who was informed about Kiba's peers because of his constant tirades, responded, Sakura took every chance to hurt the demon, it didn't help that it had a crush on the girl. Tsunade then concluded that a quick checkup wouldn't hurt. Anbu. Get me both, Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno. Fukasaku's arrival was signaled by a puff of smoke. He was a couple of miles from Wave's capital. He was not going to make his presence known to the Suna shinobi who were protecting Wave. Naruto would require a lot of hops to get there. Then, in an attempt to shorten his journey, he collected some sage chakra. Then he sensed it. A malevolent, ominous presence. His affinity for nature made it easy for him to find the source. Somewhere in Wave was where it was. Then he leapt for Wave and his prey. You could see the Count completing paperwork inside Wave country. He hated doing it, but there was nothing he could do about it. He nearly lost his job as Count once he allowed someone else to do it. He put him in the middle of his castle and impaled him to stop that. In 400 years, he never allowed anyone else to handle his paperwork. Then he felt a strange presence coming. He had no idea how he had gotten past the guards. An elderly toad with gray hair was visible when the door slid open. Orochimaru recognized him as a toad elder named Fukasaku because of his recollections. Alucard snatched his gun out of his left hand. His eyes occasionally flicked to the current file while his right hand continued to write the documents. Then he aimed at the toad with haste. He considered shooting, but then he recalled that he had used his blood to sign the toad contract. In order to at least hear what the toad elder had to say, he signed the contract with his soul, since blood was the soul's currency. With no intention of dying, the toad responded hastily, I don't know what you're doing here, toad, so start croaking. Alucard was bowed to by Fukasaku, who said, I came here for two things. The first one is to apologize for not preventing you getting executed. Alucard stopped writing because he was so shocked. Though he believed they had also deceived him, he found himself in front of the toad elder, who was bowing to him. Then he went on to complete his paperwork, saying, I see, and the second one? Alucard then flashed a small smile and said, I also came here to get some information. We need to know if Jiraiya was involved in your execution or had at least knowledge on it. The toad felt the impulse to slam his head against the wall. How could he not have considered that? There were only a few seal masters in Konoha, and only one of them knew about the seal that contained the Kyuubi. Tell who do you think made sure that I couldn't release the Kyuubi? He asked. That only could be Jiraiya, but why would he do it? Jiraiya isn't someone who blindly takes orders. The Count's response was spite, but Fukasaku didn't believe it. Alucard grinned and said, I don't think that Jiraiya would have thought that you were the Kyuubi. Fukasaku wondered about it, but he couldn't think of anything. It wasn't against me or the Kyuubi, it was against fate. I don't get it. Fukasaku couldn't help but spit out a sweat drop that sounded a lot like Jiraiya, especially when he was younger. You see, Jiraiya in his need to surpass Orochimaru, tried to become more famous than the Snake Sannin ever would be. He tried by making himself a legend, but he soon found that took too much time and it would leave him no time for his perversion. Ignoring it, Alucard went on. The green toad sensed the direction of the explanation, but he was still unsure, so he put away those goals until he heard his role in the prophecy. What has the prophecy to do with it? Jiraiya believed that since he would meet the child of the prophecy and influence it, he could be famous as the child prophecy's mentor and advisor. Stated Alucard. The story was visible to the older toad, but still. Alucard then wanted to mention Merlin and his part in King Arthur's legends, but he realized that he wasn't in his former world, so he settled for something else. Isn't that a bit far-fetched? Advisors are most of the time forgotten in comparison to the true ruler? He asked. The Toad Elder couldn't help but recall Jiraiya's first book, which did highlight his own efforts. We aren't speaking of some ruler, we are speaking of the savior of the world. Of course Jiraiya would make some book that would accentuate his own merits. Is this the reason you started writing, Jiraiya? With one exception, everything made sense, and the Toad Elder gradually began to believe the Count. Then why did he kill you instead of train you, if training the child of the prophecy was his goal? Asked Fukasaku. Jiraiya believed that he would dead before he could harvest the benefits, like fate was laughing at him. So in an act of spite, he decided to stop the prophecy from happening. So he tried to kill me on several occasions. Fukasaku inquired, what were those occasions? He first tried to kill me by chakra exhaustion. He made me try to summon a toad when I was already dangerously low on chakra. When that failed he threw into a ravine. I managed to summon Gamabunta to catch me, He then let Orochimaru attack me when I used a Rasengan on his henchman, Kabuto. He also taught me those two techniques so that other villages would try to kill me because they would fear that I would become a second Yondaime. The toad was speechless. Jiraiya had made numerous attempts to murder him, but no one had taken notice. It's not possible. Was everything Jiraiya did for him merely a means of murder? What caused us to be so blind? Naruto was being offered all of those jutsu, but he wasn't prepared for them at his current level. He might have died as a result. How far have you fallen, Jiraiya? Then he spoke to the Count. I must now tell the great Toad Sage about it. The Toad then called himself back to Mount Mayaboku in reverse, saying, I see, now I have to inform the great Toad Sage about this. See you later, boy. We will meet again soon. The Count thought, this might be a trick, but I doubt it. Sakura asked, you called, Hokage? Sama? As she stood in front of the Hokage and the council, and she honestly didn't know why. Unless it was illegal to dive into Sasuke-kun's trash, she did nothing wrong. She occasionally looked for items that smelled like his, like a discarded shirt, and if she was lucky, she might find some partially consumed food, which would allow her to receive an indirect kiss. Tsunade responded to her inquiries. Yes, I will give you both a physical examination. The pink-haired girl asked her mentor, why? Hinata Hyuga defected from Konoha. Sasuke, a little irritated that he had been called for someone as worthless as Hera weak and, in the Uchiha's opinion, a waste of spacia asked, so what do I have to do with it? Shuza told the two Team 7 members, we believe that she still loves the demon and could have tried to take revenge on you. With his characteristic arrogant smirk, he said, like that weakling could even touch me. Sakura, on the other hand, gushed about Sasuke and uttered. The admiration was evident in her eyes as she said, you're so great Sasuke-kun. It made no difference that she was standing in front of the council room. Sasuke always came first. Her hands began to glow green as she made some hand signs and said, you would be surprised, but now is not the time. Let me do a checkup, just to be sure. She checked on the girl first. She was found not guilty. Tsunade then proceeded to the final Uchiha and began the examination. Everything appeared to be normal until she became aware of an irregularity. Then she focused on it and recognized it. I see, Shikaku, you were right, she took revenge on the Uchiha. Hamaru commented that he didn't believe Tsunade when she said, he seems fine, his performance hasn't decreased, in fact it has risen over time. Tsunade made a lot of mistakes, and everyone does. She didn't try to destroy his performance, instead she made him sterile. Everyone in the room, with the exception of Heishi, exclaimed, what? Although some people didn't like it, the Sharingan was a valuable bloodline. Konoha has now permanently lost it. Did she dare to ruin my opportunity to bring my clan back to life? As he added a second name to his list of people he wanted to kill, Sasuke thought, I will kill her just like the rest who are in my way. Sakura asked, her desperation evident in her voice, you can cure it? Right? Her entire world was falling apart. She had everything planned. The Uchiha would fall in love with her after she took him out on a date. She would make sure to invite Ino to their wedding, after which she would give birth to numerous children and the Uchiha family would live a happy life. However, it didn't appear to be occurring at the moment. Tsunade explained, she effectively destroyed all the cells that were used to make sperm. Can't you make new ones? For the bubblegum girl, the Hokage's statement was the final straw. No, if he had one spermatogonium I could make new ones, but that isn't the case. She then sagged, and two Anbu arrived and took her away with a shunsen. No, this can't be true, this has to be a genjutsu. Kai. Ka. Heishi commented, it appears that the Uchiha clan has vanished. Sasuke took note of this and remarked. What do you mean? The Uchiha clan is no more. I'm still here. Yes, but he can't pass on his Sharingan, so it can only be described as a special jutsu, replied Heishi. With venom in his voice, Sasuke said, no, this can't be happening, I'm a Uchiha, an elite, a god among men. I won't accept this, I'm a Uchiha. Heishi simply scoffed and retorted. That is the way it works, brat, accept it. Although he maintained his stoic exterior, he was actually quite content. It was now inevitable that the Byakugan would become the world's most powerful dojutsu. Because the Senju and Uchiha will eventually go extinct, it also made the Hyuga the strongest clan in Konoha. All of this was made possible by her daughter, who was regarded as the clan's failure. Apparently, she wasn't entirely worthless after all. Heishi was about to say, I suggest that we take the Uchiha clan grounds and divide a Nara Shikamaru interrupted, saying, "When we catch her, I will give her a quick death instead of being branded a branch member as a sign of gratitude." Shikaku noticed a few drops of perspiration on his face. He wanted to know what made Shikamaru so active, but his son got ahead of him. "Dad, someone spooked the deer." Without showing any signs of indolence, the clan head asked, "Where are they and how many?" His clan needed him right now, so he could be lazy later. "They around the central plaza and they are around 30. Bang. When a tiny explosion was heard, Shikamaru and every council member fled to the central plaza, where the sound was coming from. Sasuke went to training, unconcerned. They discovered that the plaza was in disarray when they got there. People were frantically trying to calm the crowd by running around like chickens with heads in Anbu. The majority were covered in chunks of deer or blood. Demanding, "What's going on here?" Tsunade said. The following was stated by one of the Anbu guarding the civilians. "Some of the deer owned by the Naras came in here, they were clearly spooked, then suddenly one of the deer exploded, Hokage. Sama." Kaharu asked, "Exploded? Deer don't explode by themselves." The Anbu said, "Yes, I don't know how, but it did." Bang. Another one went by, encasing the majority of people in deer. A remote control was held by the Alucard clone, who was standing atop the Hokage monument on the Sandame's head. Orochimaru had created a set of prototype explosives that were connected to the remote in case he needed to battle a sensor or ran out of chakra. Since they were prototypes, they were small, but the clone didn't mind. He was more irritated by the lengthy process of gathering the deer and forcing them to swallow the explosives. After that, using some of the explosives to direct them toward the plaza was fairly simple. At this point, there was just one question that required an answer. What happened to the Kakaichu? Termite nests I put all over Konoha that Orochimaru built in case one of his Mokuton experiments went awry? He heard a shinobi curse and the sounds of a roof collapsing. Sweaty, exhausted, and bloody, the whole Konoha council was in that state. The deer that exploded was the first thing they had to deal with. To calm everyone down and tend to some of the injured, that alone took an hour. However, none of the deer were able to be saved. They then had to contend with termites that consumed chakra. Finding their nests didn't take them long, but it wasn't finished yet. Despite the termites' excellent defense of their nest, 4 Junins were sent away due to chakra exhaustion. To the chagrin of the Aburame, they ultimately had to destroy them all. They would have returned home, but they were unable to do so because of an urgent meeting. Thus, they were prepared to conclude their meeting in the council. Sume was the one speaking. Since the response was going to spark controversy, Tsunade wanted to sigh. "We should talk about the recent attack, but it is best that we finish our previous topic first. We know that you send out a squad after them, at least 2 of them died. What happened to the other 2? As anticipated by Tsunade, everyone was agitated after losing 3 of their best agents on a single mission, including 2 who were able to restrain Biju. Tenzo died, Kakashi survived but at the cost of his Sharingan eye. In the event of a Biju attack, everyone was unsure of what to do. Then Shuza inquired, "How are we going to fight the Bijus?" In an attempt to minimize the significance of the Sharingan, Heishi commented, "We have Jiraiya, he can seal them." He didn't intend for Konoha to launch a project aimed at producing a synthetic Sharingan. Tsunade said, "Sorry, but Jiraiya is on a mission." "What mission?" Danzo inquired. "He's looking for a way to use the seals on the brat's body against him." They hadn't heard of any seals on the count, so the council room was filled with questions like, "What seals?" and "What type of seals?" Troublesome. Shikaku sighed deeply in response. Shikaku's deep sighs were usually disastrous, so Shuza tensed. "He uses seals to restrain his power. Am I correct?" Tsunade nodded, confirming the prediction. The head of the Nara clan, determined to find out as much as possible about Alucard, asked, "What powers?" The other council members gulped. This was a horrible combination. Something I can only describe as insane regeneration and the creation of black mist. We also suspect that he has more powers than that. Someone who uses mist to hide was almost impossible to kill in a single blow. When you add regeneration, he becomes almost unstoppable. Then Kaharu saw how Alucard's regenerative powers were being developed. The elder frowned and said, "Insane regeneration, care to give an example?" He regenerated his arms like it was nothing. Although growing new arms was an amazing accomplishment, the council wasn't shocked because it was consistent with insane regeneration. "So you're sending Jiraiya to see if those seals could be used to their advantage?" asked Danzo. It was a good plan, and he approved it. It would give Konoha a weapon that could compete with a Biju in addition to eliminating a threat. Hamaru commented, But that still means that we aren't protected against Kumo, who have 2 demons. Sasuke can only take out 1 at a time. She could see how a Jinchuriki pincer attack could easily take Konoha. Shuza questioned, can't we use summons to stop them? Recalling the stories of the battle between Gamabunta and the Shukaku, Tsunade remarked, they can only stop them for a moment. Sume muttered, damn. The room was startled when Danzo slammed his cane to the floor. The council members and even the Hokage stared at Danzo in disbelief. We don't have time for this. We need to address the current attack. This is an attack on our pride. We must retaliate. On top of that, he stole a pair of Byakugan. They had forgotten that he was still a powerful shinobi despite his disability. Danzo was a silent man who only spoke when it was absolutely necessary, which added to the shock. His performance was the clearest indication that something needed to happen. I agree, we need to show the other nations that we can't be attacked without consequences, Hamaru replied. Shikaku received some confused looks when he said, we can't just attack him, he will use his identity and recruit Snow, Tea, and Wind Country. We would be lucky if we managed to gather a single minor village. The Yamanaka clan's matriarch questioned, why is that? Many villages offered to ally in the past. It's the demonstration he let the Cage do at the Chunin exams. If a village works with us, they will create the impression that they support this kind of actions. This will result in a loss of missions and thus money. So we can conclude that an assault isn't impossible. Another council motion was, we could assassinate him or at least the Hyuga. Shikaku had to put their feet on the ground, even though many people supported this motion. They didn't have many shinobi on reserve because they lost a lot of them in the Kyuubi attack and the Sound invasion, so this was a possible issue. This is a suicide mission, so who are we going to send? The Hokage shook her head and remarked, it must be someone who has a chance but can be replaced easily. Do we have someone in Anbu? The female head of the Yamanaka clan then had an idea. Anbu is already working at maximum capacity. With the loss of Cat, Tenzo, and Rat, we can't lose anybody. That and Konoha would be permanently lost due to her indecency. What about Mitarashi-san? She is skilled enough, and we still have the Yamanaka clan and Ibiki. Shibi Aburame commented, what about the snake summons? We could need them against the Biju. Kaharu, who was constantly watching Anko in case she had treasonous thoughts, explained, she can't summon nor control them very well, on top of that she can't pass on the contract. As he prepared to abduct her, assuming she survived, Danzo remarked, it also means that we don't have to worry anymore about Orochimaru's influence on her. Very well. Anko Mitarashi will be sent on the assassination mission. Anko was enjoying herself immensely while sitting on a roof. Yes, this is better than practically every torture session she's had because of the blood, the chaos, and the screams. Unfortunately, it had already been finished and cleaned up. The appearance of an Anbu interrupted her plans to head to her apartment, saying, Anko sighed after hearing, the Hokage has summoned you. She had just returned from a demanding mission, didn't she deserve a little relaxation? She stood up and began to make her way to the Hokage tower after saying, I will come. The Anbu grabbed her shoulder and shunshined her in the council room because she didn't like the speed. Unhappy about it, Anko was going to use some snakes to maim him, but her cage stopped her. She stood up straight and bowed slightly to the council, saying, Anko Mitarashi, you were summoned by the council. She didn't want to sabotage her slim chance of getting promoted by being rude. After telling her subordinate, the Hokage said, yes, what do you want from me? Anko was only able to say one thing after processing the information. This is a solo S-rank mission. Hinata Hyuga defected last night and went towards Wave. You are hereby ordered to eliminate Hinata Hyuga and if possible Alucard Shitsuki. Wa? She asked the council after she had completely recovered from the shock. So you're asking me to infiltrate Wave, which is guarded by Suna Shinobi, track down Hinata Hyuga and afterwards kill her all under the eyes of an S-rank ninja, all by myself? Danzo responded to the query. No, Anko's chest was starting to burn with a tiny ember of hope. We are ordering you. Then it was abruptly cut off. After all of her years of service, she was sent on a mission that she had no chance of returning from, which shocked her. Although there are missions like this in Konoha, they are always voluntary. Although there were some exceptions to this rule, they didn't apply in this particular situation. She was upset and saddened by Konoha's refusal to accept her as a full citizen. When she realized the council was looking at her, she simply uttered. The council scowled as she departed after saying, it will be done. On one of the demon quarters roofs sat Alucard's clone. He was planning his next move to destabilize Konoha as a whole. He was considering everything he could do with the items that are kept in the other bases of Orochimaru. Except for the final details, he had most of it planned. He saw the purple-haired special Junin at that precise moment. He smiled. After all, he had some free time. In addition, she had taken some of his blood. No one takes his blood and escapes punishment. He therefore followed her covertly to her home, which was a short distance from the demon quarter. Then he walked into her apartment, a standard one-bedroom flat. It wasn't a dump, but it wasn't ostentatious either. However, he did spot a snake slithering around the apartment. Then, too distraught to notice the clone coming in, Anko came in from a nearby room. She eventually noticed the clone. The clone saw that she had given up, so he asked, "What do you want?" When he sat in that dungeon, he saw himself in her eyes. There was no life in them. Alucard's clone sneered. "Pathetic. Come to finish me off before I can kill her?" Anko asked resignedly, still in shock at how easily she had been cast aside. She sincerely hoped that her efforts would be recognized there. The clone remarked, somewhat disgusted, "I came for different reasons, but now I just see you're a waste of my time." "Stop." Anko, growing irritated, said. She put a lot of effort into becoming this strong. She refused to have her labors disregarded. "Stop what?" the smiling clone asked. She growled in response. "Stop saying that. You being pathetic wasn't the only thing that annoyed her. It was the smirk on his face and the tone he used. Although she was an A-rank ninja and he was an S-rank, she really wanted to erase that smirk from his face. The disparity between the two was simply too great. "Yes." As if it were the simplest thing in the world, the clone said, "Then stop being pathetic." She shouted, "I'm not pathetic," as she threw a kunai at the Count's clone. The clone simply put his hand on the kunai. The purple-haired Junin became confused when he began to laugh. "Is the man really bipolar or something? Why are you laughing?" The Count then threw the kunai back at Anko, who had not had time to fully avoid it and suffered a small cut on her left cheek. "This was the woman I came for." The two were unaware that the snake was being struck. It caused the snake to scream and flee, but it wasn't fatal. The sound of the snake's cries caused Anko to turn slightly. For as long as she can remember, it has been a part of her life and has helped her cope with loneliness. Taking advantage of this, the clone ran in her direction. Then his head rested on her left shoulder. Then he began to lick his tongue at the blood dripping from the wound. The clone purred in Anko's ear, "Your blood is quite the delicacy, Anko." Conversely, Anko maintained her composure and had no plans to pass away. Wondering why he was so interested in her, she asked, "So what brings you here?" "Revenge. What else?" Anko was both confused and terrified by the response. He was scared because he was a sadistic S-rank ninja who was reportedly out for her blood, and he was confused because this was their first encounter. Did he misunderstand the question, perhaps? Although he took the Hyuga with him, he might have assumed that I meant in Konoha. For what reason did he do that? Is it for money, or is there another reason? No, she was not abducted. Rather, she voluntarily approached Wave. But why? Naruto Uzumaki is supported by Wave, but that can't be it. When she saw that the Count was licking her cut cheek in the same manner that she had licked the Gaki's cheek 3 years prior, when she had finally reconnected with Orochimaru after a long absence, her eyes widened. He would have a serious grudge against Konoha, thinking of the little squirt. Then, like a sledgehammer, it struck her. The clone simply raised his head over her shoulder and uttered, "You're supposed to be dead." Anko stiffened slightly. She knew the answer, but it would be obvious that she had Orochimaru's mark. "Yet, here I am. Now that we have introduced ourselves, I have a question for you. Why do you still stay in Konoha?" she asked. She therefore made the decision to use a question to sidestep the inquiry. When the female snake summoner heard the question, Alucard's doppelganger unknown currencying smirked and asked, "Why wouldn't I?" She winced. The Count's statement deeply unsettled her. Being Orochimaru's apprentice isn't a very popular occupation, especially since you carry his mark. "You know what happened to me, do you?" She had been afraid of it ever since his execution. Then, with Orochimaru acting as the executioner, she began to see herself in the same situation as the tortured Jinchuriki. She pushed those images from her mind and spoke. The clone saw a hint of insecurity in his voice and took advantage of it right away. "They wouldn't do to me." Anko Mitarashi, Special. Junin of Konoha, Division. T&I. Department, Specialization. Ninjutsu. Elemental Affinities. Fire and Minor Earth. "Are you sure?" "I beg to differ." Anko knew what he was doing. No information in her file should be so startling that she would leave Konoha. Alucard persuaded her that he was referencing her file, so he just went straight to the point. "So, you have my file. So what?" Anko was taken aback by this statement. In case of any sign of influence due to the cursed seal. This piece of information was not in her file, but she was certain that it was in her actual file. Elimination. Anko was aware that using the cursed seal would result in her death, but she kept listening because she knew he was aware of her knowledge. Sasuke Uchiha. If he is in control, disregard any indication of influence from the cursed seal. If not, render him unconscious and notify the Hokage. Anko was shocked that the brat, who is usually trained but never performs a mission, got away with it and that she, the diligent shinobi, was killed. She whispered to herself, "Don't my years of service count for anything?" But Alucard's copy could clearly hear her. If it were that simple, Anko would have left sooner. You were just useful, and when that stops you will be dead. Judging from the way I found you, I take it this is the moment. My question still stands. Why don't you just leave? She sneered. She paused and mirrored the Count's action. Where can I go? A shinobi village? All Konoha has to do is release the fact that I have a cursed seal. Anywhere else would result in me being chased by several hundred nin, which would result in my death. He began by undermining her already shaky Konoha beliefs. Then he inquired as to why she persisted. She thought cynically, the only thing missing is an offer to join his country. These are his intentions, she said, her eyes widening. She then squinted, saying that even if his intentions seemed good, she would no longer be duped. Then, with suspicion, she inquired. Anko winced at the change in his eyes and said, "You want me to join your country, even if you know about the cursed seal? You know where it comes from and what it can do?" His eyes, which had initially suggested amusement, were now pointed menacingly at her. He made it obvious that he didn't like her remark. His tone of voice made it obvious who was the stronger of the two, and Anko understood. "Don't insult me. I've dealt with it in the past." She gave a meek nod, but she was still curious as to why she had been invited. Alucard's clone simply asked, "Why do you want me to join your village?" The message was clear to Anko. This was a one-time offer, so take it or leave it. It's just a whim of mine, so choose quickly. So she took the only logical decision. Where do I sign up? Scene change. Alucard was making plans for his free time. He could go back to training, which he truly enjoyed, and he could hone his more potent techniques without any limitations. A space big enough to hold his training was all he needed. The sliding of the door interrupted him as he was studying a number of maps. It showed a tense, slightly restless Hinata. When Alucard gestured for her to come inside, she did so. Naruto-kun, can I ask you some questions? As she did, she also appeared a bit less anxious. The Count asked, "So what do you want to know? What happened during your absence? His life as Vlad the Impaler, his death, his beginnings as a vampire, his life as the various counts of Wallachia, his defeat by Abraham Van Helsing, his life as an experiment, his involvement in World War II, and his life under Integra were all explained to her." It was the beginning of the evening when he finished his story. Hinata had a lot on his mind, particularly his 3 former wives. Alucard then made the decision to ask her next question. After all, she said questions. Now that she was restless once more, Hinata paused to take a deep breath before asking, "So what is your next question?" The question was unexpected because he could tell she was either trying to save Shizune-san or kill her directly. "I was wondering what you have planned for Shizune-san when you attack Konoha." Given that she was quite anxious about it, he concluded that it was the former. After all, he had no issue with it. Shizune had never harmed him, but she had also failed to assist him, so he would repay the favor. Hinata's desire to save Shizune was still not explained by that. Hinata let out the breath she had been holding and said, "So you are interested in my plans, Tsunade's little lapdog? I wonder why." She saw only curiosity and no negative feelings. She can now persuade him to save her. Hinata intrigued Alucard by explaining, "I owe her a big debt. She allowed me to meet you without prying eyes." He realized he hadn't responded yet, so he did so now. "It appears that I have misjudged her." Nothing at all. There were no invasions, deer exploding, or roofs collapsing, and it was a calm afternoon in Konoha. This was used by Kiba, Shino, Sai, Shikamaru, Shoji, and Team 9 to unwind. Unfortunately for him, this was viewed as a mission to fortify the ties of Konoha's finest, and only Sasuke wasn't in the mood to come. On Training Ground 7, they were lounging. With the exception of Shikamaru, who was napping, the rest of the group sat in front of the poles. Kiba sat on one, Shino leaned serenely on another, and Lee was punching on a third. Kiba muttered, "I still can't believe she left." Her defection surprised him greatly, and even though she wasn't entirely over it, he was confident that she was improving. The dog user never realized it was a front. Shino replied stoically, "There is nothing that can be done about it. He always believed this would happen, but he had no evidence, so he remained silent." Unhappy with the response, Kiba snarled. Shino then began buzzing, telling his teammate to calm down. "What do you mean? Nothing can be done about it. Can't we just organize a retrieval mission just like we did for Sasuke?" They all stared at Shino in shock, knowing that Hinata had betrayed their parents. "We did, and they were defeated, most dead. They sent out a retrieval team, but they were not told." Kiba had one query while they were analyzing the data. The others gave him a dumb look and said, "Why did she leave? I mean, it is not that she still loves that demon." They thought that was the only reason she could have left. Shino made the decision to let him know. "It's logical to assume that she still does." Uncertain, he questioned, "Even after all this time? She ought to be over her little crush on him since he had been gone for 3 years. He was genuinely baffled by it. No one was specifically asked, but Shikamaru was the one who answered. Why does she even love that demon anyway? It was idiot, Adobe. The group fell silent when Shikamaru said, "Don't even bother. Trying to understand a female mind is just too troublesome. The only thing more troublesome than trying to understand the female mind is the female you are trying to understand." The first to break the silence was Neji. Shino wondered if they should know, but ultimately he concluded it was best for them. Aburame.san, you said that we send a retrieval group. How did they fail the mission? He asked. They all remained silent while the Impaler interfered with Konoha on a regular basis. They fought. The Impaler, Shino, chose to learn more about him after realizing this. Shikamaru sighed. Nara.san, you fought him. Was he strong? He was extremely troublesome. He waltzed through every plan I made. His strength is enough to break my shadow mimic technique without a problem. Shino did not say anything. Can you tell more about his abilities? Lee then made the decision to assume control, saying, he uses Kenjutsu and Taijutsu. No Genjutsu or Ninjutsu. His regeneration is very high. The Konoha Nin were unhappy because he had only one obvious weakness: long range attacks. Even though he is not young, his Taijutsu is superb. His moves are fast and deadly. Genjutsu will have no effect on him, since he has no chakra. The only people with long range attacks were Sasuke, Shino, and Ino. Shino was completely out of the question because Alucard lacked any chakra. Sasuke and Ino were therefore the only ones who stood a chance of defeating him if they had to. Neji's remark was also ineffective. Sai recognized that Tenten was the only one who had fought him and survived, so he addressed her. His Kenjutsu consists of 2 mini kunai launchers that launch pieces of silver at high speed. He is also proficient with other weapons. There went his weakness. They now realize why he was so dangerous. He had no apparent weaknesses, so it was very hard to plan ahead. What else would you like to add, Tenten? When Neji looked into her teammate's eyes, she saw hate. Then Neji's venomous words were cut off. No, it's not more than that. It's more like that his existence is the root of all evil and she will be the one to remove it. The people surrounding the weapon user were at a loss for words, and Ino's arrival broke the awkward silence. It's a cruel and sadistic monster that's need to be put down. Shikamaru passed out and was on the verge of running away when she said, Hey guys, I found out something amazing. Tenten stopped Shikamaru's plans to flee the problematic situation because the last time she had discovered something amazing, he had been forced to go shopping for a full day with him as the mule. Hey Ino. Tell me what you heard, Ino just stated. Are you aware that I am trying to find my father's killer? All she got was a nod from Shikamaru and Choji, and curious glances from the others. I was trying to find out something in the demon quarter. There, I came across a man I believed to be knowledgeable. I hit him with one of my clan's jutsus. Tenten became irritated and spoke to her blonde coworker. He didn't have any information on my father, but he knew something else. Ino paused solely to get her attention. What? Since they think that the Impaler is Naruto Uzumaki, it appears that one of the larger Yakuza clans is leaving. It is absurd, isn't it? She thought her friends would agree with her or at least laugh with her, but they appeared to be taking it very seriously. Shikamaru said, troublesome. The other members of the group agreed, though some were a little dubious. Are you not buying into this bullshit that he is an S-rank ninja who rises from the grave? He was dead and always would be. Shikamaru's words burst that small bubble, and she couldn't believe they all bought into this ridiculous story. That's the reality. After the Hokage and my father verified it, Ino turned to face her friend and teammate in disbelief, which was partly brought on by the news and partly by Shikamaru's lack of confidence in her. Why didn't you tell us? You knew. Shikamaru simply yawned and uttered. Tenten leapt to his feet and exclaimed, it was an S-rank secret, breaking it would be too troublesome. Hernan. Spandex. Wearing teammate interrupted her as she was about to say, we should inform the village about it, so we can kill the monster. What aspect of the S-rank secret do you find confusing? Knowing that she would die if she revealed the information, she sagged a little. Shino was standing by Neji. In addition, what will happen if we tell the public about this? It was his plump teammate, not Shikamaru, who answered. The rest of the group widened their eyes as he said, it would cause a riot. The Nara added, yes, they would demand a war that we can't win and that would be troublesome. The others found it hard to believe that Wave, despite his economic strength, had no power other than the demon. Even though he was an S-rank nin, they thought he wasn't powerful enough to stop Konoha's full power. Kiba chose to say this. What prevented us from winning this war? We are the world's strongest village, after all. The Nara responded, we wouldn't be fighting one nation, but for one of them being Suna. The others were shocked. He was making fun of them, and they were powerless to stop him. Do you see why this needs to remain a secret? Shikamaru, who was nominated by his friends, was then asked by the blonde. Where is Sasuke, please? According to the statement, Uchiha had left the training ground as soon as Ino revealed to her who Alucard really was. He was now using his fist to beat up a training dummy in his compound, and the curse seal on his neck was pulsing, giving him chakra. That Dobi, damn it, he is still stronger than me despite all of this additional training. That he is. He stopped abruptly upon hearing the voice, astonished that someone could approach him so stealthily without being detected, and turned to see an elderly man with black hair and bandages, whom he instantly recognized. What has brought you here, Danzo? The Avenger said. Danzo just said. I want to make you an offer. The ability to defeat both your brother and Alucard Shitsuki. The Avenger was very interested in this because he needed the ability to destroy those two completely and didn't care about the repercussions because, after all, he was an Avenger. Hinata sat on her bed, thinking on what to do with the information she was given. It was a lot to take in, but in the end she managed to do it. Now all she had to do was to answer two questions. Does she still love the new him? And if so, is she willing to become a vampire to spend her time with him? She knew that he changed, but so did she. She has seen the dark side of humanity. Humans are disgusting cowards who hide behind others, and when they find someone weaker than them, they immediately abuse their power for their own benefits. Disgusting creatures they are. There may be some exceptions, but that amount was very small, so she had no qualm with losing her humanity. The true question was, did she still love him? Who was she kidding? She still loved him and she knew it. The only thing that could change it was the fact that he had 3 wives during her absence. She wasn't angry at him for trying to move on, which was something she would have wanted if she was really dead. She was jealous of his wives though, since they had already sex with him and she didn't. She could comfort herself though, since she was his first love. She then got an evil glint in her eyes. That and his last love, she will ensure that. Tsunade was furious that someone had the audacity to destroy her paperwork, and she was about to give the mess her famous drop kick when she noticed that it was gray. Normally, she would be drinking sake, but Shizune had hidden her sake, and she was almost finished with her work when a bloody mass of gray appeared on her desk in a puff of smoke. The blood stained her work, rendering it useless. What the hell, Jiraiya? She roared at the now identified Sanin. Jiraiya attempted to speak to her, but he was only able to raise his head before he passed out. Tsunade then sighed and began tending to his teammate, who was badly hurt, with multiple broken ribs and ruptured organs, and his exterior didn't look any better, with numerous small and large cuts all over him. It took her some time, but she was able to heal the pervert without any problems, and he was now slowly waking up. So what took place? Asked Tsunade. Jiraiya chose to suppress his perversity for the time being because he knew it was not the right moment. Tsunade realized that Naruto was responsible for this. She really wanted to punch the brat, but he wasn't present, so Jiraiya should be enough. The Toads discovered my participation in the execution and they aren't happy with it. Why did they think the brat was real? As she gradually recovered from the blow, Jiraiya uttered. I'm the only one with access to the key. I assume they forbade you from calling them? Jiraiya just nodded in response. Is it still possible to use Sage Mode? Yes, but only for limited time. Jiraiya then noticed that Tsunade was shaking with rage and did the only sensible thing, which was to run away. This was a wise move because a few seconds later, the Hokage office exploded, and the Godem then yelled. Damn him. The notorious Itachi Uchiha sat in a small tea house somewhere in the country of lightning, drinking tea. He was known all over the world for killing his clan, but almost no civilian could recognize him, and those who did were silenced by a Sharingan-induced genjutsu. He should have been trying to save Sasori's spy network, but since Sasori's agent's seals were erased upon his death, he was temporarily unemployed. Itachi could report back to Pain, but he believed that his assistance was unnecessary, and the tea was surprisingly good. He then received a spike of chakra inside his chakra system from his ring, informing him that there would be a meeting, and he put the money on the table before leaving for a nearby Akatsuki hideout. He then activated the projection communication system and saw the faces of the other members, with the exception of Hidan and Kukazu, who arrived half an hour later, the former mumbling curses. "You called us, but why?" After saying, "We were going to capture that nibby bitch," Itachi turned to face the ring-eyed leader, who appeared to have chosen to ignore the outburst. Zetsu discovered some fascinating facts. "We have located the Kyuubi Jinchuriki." He was truly shocked, even though he didn't display it. It's a remarkable accomplishment to seal it so silently, and he questioned who had claimed it. "The new Jinchuriki, then, is who?" Kisame, intrigued by his new rival, asked. The plant man glanced at Kisame and remarked. All of the Akatsuki members were silent when the statement was made. "It is Alucard Shitsuki, formerly known as Naruto Uzumaki." They were aware that it sounded unbelievable, but they also understood that describing each member's abilities would sound unbelievable. The clan slayer said nonchalantly, "I see." On the inside, he was freaking out because he thought his little brother was strong, but he wasn't an S-rank ninja and wasn't even close to that level. The count, on the other hand, had shown that he was deserving of that title, and a fight between the two would result in Sasuke's death. He needed to kill the Kyuubi Jinchuriki quickly, and fortunately, he was a target of the Akatsuki, so he could pursue him without facing any repercussions. Then he realized that he had lost sight of the conversation and focused on it. Kisame wasn't entirely sure, but the plantman said, "Perhaps, but it does explain some things like his dislike for Konoha and his rescue of the Ichibi Jinchuriki." So, how did he manage to survive? And how did he get so powerful? With the exception of Tobi, who was frantically trying to attract the other members' attention by waving his hand in the air, no one was able to respond to the question. "Yes, I am aware. What if the Kyuubi has some crazy power? After all, Tobi has no idea what its container gets as power." After finishing his speech, he was given an awkward silence, and he saw that everyone was staring at him in disbelief. Tobi pointed to his face and said, "Is Toba's mask covered in something?" The first person to recover was the leader of Akatsuki Pain, who stated. Then Tobi scratched the back of his neck awkwardly and said, "Tobi, you said something that made sense." "Does it?" Even the leader was shocked by the collective fault that resulted from those words. Tobi simply said, childishly. Zetsu glanced at the man in the mask and said, "Tobi is a smart boy." He then turned to face the clan slayer. "Even I believed that for a moment. You know, Itachi? How does it feel to be the sole person capable of bringing the Uchiha clan back to life?" All of the members were intrigued by those words. They all had theories about why Itachi killed his entire clan except for his younger brother, but they were all aware that he had done so. "What are you saying? He was a mess on the inside, but he asked the Uchiha stoically. Was his brother alive? Was he put in prison?" And so on. All of these questions were running through his mind, but none of them matched reality. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki were somewhat adored by the Hyuga clan's heiress. When your brother killed the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, she wasn't happy and retaliated by sterilizing him. "My little brother is sterile? All my plans for my brother to restore the Uchiha clan are for nothing?" The Avenger's mind suddenly exploded with images of a Chibi Itachi using his Anbu katana to chase a Chibi Hinata, occasionally using fireballs and Amaterasu that the Chibi Hinata could hardly avoid, and ending the chase with the Chibi Hinata impaled by his Susanoo's sword. The Chibi Itachi then began to laugh uncontrollably, and Tobi interrupted his mental episode. "Oh, a tale. Tobi enjoys tales. Tobi wants to know how it goes on." The man in the mask gave Zetsu a hopeful look. The plantman said, "The girl fled to wave, and goes on to live a happy life." Then, with a heavy sigh, Zetsu said, "Act or no act, it was still annoying." "Yes, Tobi, yes." Pain concluded that they ought to move on to more significant topics. "What did you manage to salvage from Sasori's spy network, Itachi?" Putting everything else aside, Uchiha, who was momentarily calmed, simply stated. "Nothing. Sasori was very paranoid and the seals he placed on his spies were destroyed upon his death." Pain gave a nod. "You understand, Kisame? Have you located the Sandy?" "I'm prepared to fight it, yes." The sword on the man's back purred in agreement, but the leader's next statement cut that off. Samahata will feast very soon. You will not, instead you and Itachi are going to capture the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Why? Not because he was disappointed, but because he truly wanted to fight both of them, and the count would be a good challenge. Kisame couldn't believe he was so close and now denied. He could become a serious thorn in my side if he keeps getting stronger at the rate he has been growing. The members could agree with Pain's reasoning. The count was extremely dangerous and needed to be stopped. Itachi was pleased because he could eliminate the threat to his brother without drawing suspicion and exact revenge on the Hyuga who also sterilized his younger brother. So, who will apprehend the Sanbi? The bounty asked the leader a question, but the leader didn't answer, which made the members wonder. They later discovered that Kisame was the only one removed from the mission. You're not serious at all? Pain shut down the whining Jushinist after growing tired of the impudence and generating some murderous intent. You understand that Toby will handle this, so don't question me. And Toby, do you understand that no jokes are allowed? Toby simply nodded. Damn you Nagato, you're attracting too much attention to me, but then again, the situation calls for drastic measures. Toby is a good boy. The masked men then departed with a representation of space. Meanwhile, Hinata was walking through the halls of the abode of the Count, the man she was looking for. She had looked for him in his study and bedroom, but to no avail. After a while she activated her Byakugan and it took her a while to locate him, since he was hard to detect with his lack of chakra. In the end she located him in a basement that was accessible thanks to a trapdoor in his bedroom. She deactivated her Byakugan and went to his bedroom and she opened the trapdoor and saw a staircase. Seeing it was pitch dark in the basement she activated her Byakugan and scaled down the stairs. When she scaled down the stairs, she was in front of a vast room that could easily accommodate 100 people. At the back of the room was a single chair and a little table next to it. On the table were 2 wine glasses and underneath it was a bucket. She could easily see the contents of the bucket, thanks to her Byakugan. Most of it was ice, but there were 3 bags with the words medical blood on it. She could also see 2 wooden doors, one in the wall on the left. Hinata decided to see through the left wall with her Byakugan and saw a room that was as long as the main room but not as breadth. On the walls were chains, but for the rest it was empty. The room was connected to another room with a door. She looked inside the room and could easily determine that it was a torture room. The tools were a giveaway. The room that was behind the main one was completely empty except for the Count who was working on some kind of box. Adjacent to that room was a storage room. Since Hinata was done examining, she entered the room, her Byakugan still activated. She then went to the back room where he saw Alucard looking at the box which she identified as his new coffin. It was quite big for a coffin, it was as long as Alucard and its width would allow some movement, but it was the height that was unique, it was almost twice as high as a normal coffin. She looked at the lid and saw an inscription. When the Count spoke to Hinata, she was startled out of her observations. The dog of Konoha was my name, now they will burn by my flames. I was wondering what brought you here, even though I don't mind your presence. He wasn't entirely truthful. He knew why she was here, but he needed to hear it directly from her. Is it possible to transform me into a vampire? The Count had observed her very well and didn't saw no doubt in her posture nor her eyes. He licked his teeth in anticipation. He then slowly walked in front of her. His eyes had a hungry look, but it didn't induce any fear at all. She knew that he could trust him, so she placed her head on her left shoulder, giving him full access to her neck. Alucard just placed his left hand on her right shoulder. He then placed his right hand on the side of her head, his thumb on her cheek. Using said thumb, he started to rub circles on her skin. The ministrations on her skin caused her to blush a dark shade of red. Alucard then brought his head slowly towards the blushing girl's head, savoring the moment. His breath on her neck brought her shivers of both anticipation and excitement. He then bit down on her neck, which caused her to gasp in pain. Ignoring the gasp of pain, he started to drink the blood, not wasting a single drop. Hinata then started to lose consciousness, but not before hearing a stray thought in her head. Sleep, my dear.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.